Chapter 25:10. A person he had clearly killed suddenly stood up. How could Ji Xueming not feel a chill down his spine? One had to know that though there were invincible elites in this world who could easily shatter stars, shatter the earth, and evaporate the sea with a breath, they definitely couldn't revive the dead. Yes, a heavenly venerable could, but even a heavenly venerable would have to pay a huge price. It was definitely not something that could be done with a wave of a hand. To say that Li Wan was revived by a heavenly venerable, Ji Xueming wouldn't believe it even if he was beaten to death. But the problem was that Li Wan really stood up. Senior Sister Li. Luo Xing was filled with surprise, but at the same time, he was a little cautious. Because who knew if Li Wan was in cahoots with Luo Xing and had just put on a show for him just now, with the goal of scheming against him. Of course, the possibility of this was too low. He was already poisoned now, and the other side had as many as 11 ascending origin tier cultivators. No matter how he thought about it, there was no need to use such a low-level technique. Ji Xueming, Li Wan said word by word, her voice filled with fury. Ji Xueming forced himself to calm down. He stared at Li Wan. I don't believe the dead can be revived. You probably have some treasure that can substitute death on you. How could Li Wan have one? She only knew that a sword was coming, and she was completely defenseless. But when the sword was about to touch the back of her head, a great force knocked her down, and then she couldn't move. Hearing Ji Xueming's performance made her explode with fury. Then, she suddenly regained her ability to move, and then stood up. In truth, she was also bafflingly very surprised. Could it be that some elite was helping in secret? She naturally wouldn't explain to him and scolded, "You shameless person, you will die a horrible death." Towards living people, Ji Xueming actually didn't fear them at all. He only cared about why Li Wan could be revived. He smiled calmly and said, "Senior Sister Li, have you forgotten what I said just now? I always do things flawlessly." Obviously, not only Luo Xing had been poisoned by him, but Li Wan was no exception. Li Wan's expression instantly changed. Ji Xueming sneakily attacking her with a sword should have been a spur of the moment, and there just happened to be such an opportunity, but to poison her and Luo Xing he definitely had plotted for a long time. Who would have thought that a fellow disciple they had known for tens of millions of years would actually be an enemy sect's spy? Although it will take some effort, it won't affect the overall situation. He waved a hand, and the 10 ascending origin tiers of the Red Flower sect immediately walked over, pressing in on Luo and Li. Luo Xing and Li Wan both frowned deeply. At this point, they could already foresee their end. Sigh. Ling Han sighed. Was he really a jinx, running into trouble wherever he went? He only wanted to find a place to settle down and first investigate the situation. He wanted to understand the location of the Empress and the others, and only then would he calmly head over. Why couldn't they let him relax a little? "Brother Ling, why you sighing again?" Ji Xueming smiled and said, "You don't have to be afraid, I won't kill you. I will study a martial art genius like you thoroughly. I want to have such an ability." He had almost completed the dark light state in half a year. This kind of talent could only be described as legendary. It made him curious and greedy. Ling Han smiled. "Aren't you curious about how this woman came back to life?" Ji Xueming laughed loudly. "Could it be you? I never covet the achievements of others, but I also won't hide my own deeds." "Of course it's me." Ling Han nodded. Ji Xueming naturally wouldn't believe it. He was merely in the dark light state. If he had such ability, then wouldn't even an old sow be able to ascend to the heavens? "Kill," he murmured. The 10 Red Flower sect members charged out. They had long since lost their patience. "Duo!" Ling Han shouted softly. Instantly, his voice rolled out like thunder, so loud that even the deaf could hear. Everyone felt a buzz in their minds, and then only blankness remained. When they regained their senses, they all looked at Ling Han in shock. The might of a shout was actually so terrifying, and how terrifying was this person's strength? It's really you," Ji Xueming said, pointing at Ling Han, his hand trembling slightly. Ling Han smiled slightly. Just now, when Ji Xueming had attacked, he had pushed Li Wan with his hidden force. As for the blood, that was real. Li Wan was indeed injured, though not seriously. He shouted again, "Immortal King Blue Sun, come out and meet me." Boom! His voice transformed into a terrifying shockwave that reverberated throughout Tranquil Mountain. Luo Xing, Li Wan, and the rest's shouts couldn't be heard because of their strength. However, Ling Han's body arts had reached the peak of the 5th level. His shout could easily sweep through the entire Tranquil Mountain. In just an instant, a figure streaked through the sky. His body was surrounded by a strange two-colored light. This was an obvious sign. This person was a 2nd-level Immortal King. Immortal King Blue Sunday, how dare you? Immortal King Blue Sun swept his gaze over and immediately snorted. The Red Flower Sect members actually dared to come here and behave so atrociously. Did they really want to ride on his head? Although he couldn't travel far, it wouldn't hurt to leave for a while. Ji Xueming was trembling. Suddenly, his eyes rolled, and he knelt on the ground. "Master, you're finally here. I thought I wouldn't be able to see you again." Senior brother Luo and junior sister Li are both traitors. They were the ones who poisoned Mistress. This, to say nothing of Li Wan and Luo Xing, who were extremely furious. Even Ling Han was slightly surprised. This person could be so shameless. "Master, he's spouting nonsense. He's the spy of the Red Flower Sect," Luo Xing hurriedly said. Meanwhile, Li Wan nodded repeatedly. The moment Celestial King Blue Sun appeared, they had subconsciously ignored Ling Han. That was because in their hearts, their master was the most powerful person. Moreover, Ling Han's body was not enshrouded by extraordinary light, so how could he be some celestial king? Immortal King Blue Sun naturally had a conclusion in his mind. In the present situation, 10 elites of the Red Flower Sect had surrounded Luo Xing and Li Wan, while Ji Xueming stood outside the circle. Wasn't this enough to explain the problem? Traitorous disciple. This celestial king humphed coldly. By this time, he naturally understood the cause of his wife's illness. He moved. Boom! The might of a celestial king burst forth. Even if there were 11 ascending origin tier cultivators on Ji Xueming's side, so what? To an ascending origin tier cultivator, a celestial king was like an adult to a baby. No matter how great the advantage of numbers was, it couldn't possibly make up for the gap in strength between the two. With a palm strike, pa, the 10 ascending origin tier cultivators instantly turned into pools of blood, and Ji Xueming was captured. This traitorous disciple definitely couldn't be executed so easily. Ji Xueming trembled. He was in despair, and his eyes were fixed on Ling Han. If it wasn't for this person, how could he have fallen to such a state? Ling Han shook his head. Ask yourself first if you have the right to criticize others. This person is? Immortal King Blue Sun asked Luo Xing and Li Wan. His name is Ling Han, and we encountered him in the Cloud Dream Swamp. Just now, it seems like it was also him who helped us resolve a crisis, Luo Xing said. He couldn't tell Ling Han's strength at all, so he could only give a vague answer. Oh. Immortal King Blue Sun pondered slightly. Fellow cultivator, please come up the mountain for a chat. Allow me to serve you some fragrant tea. Chapter 25:12. The Grey Hat Man's eyes were wide open. His face was filled with disbelief. He was actually killed by his own weapon. There were no killing runes on the end of the spear, so it should have been a normal wound. However, the man in the gray hat felt a terrifying chi activity wreaking havoc in his body, destroying his life force and making him weaker and weaker. He was not far from death. He died with everlasting regret. How could a mere Dark Light Realm brat be so powerful? Even if his realm was the same as his, it was impossible for him to be this powerful, unless the other party was an immortal king. But was there a second immortal king in the Heavy Moon sect? Before he could finish his thought, he had already lost consciousness forever. Ling Han didn't take it to heart at all. He continued to stride forward. To him, this was just a small interlude. Who asked his opponent to kill him right away? Lord Liao is dead. Not good, Lord Liao is dead. Seeing that the man in the gray hat was killed, the camp was in chaos. A group of ascending origin tier-level elites charged out, glaring angrily at Ling Han. However, none of them made a move. They hadn't noticed any signs of fighting before, but the man in the gray hat had died. Was Ling Han too strong? Naturally, he couldn't act rashly. "Or you?" someone asked in a low voice. Ling Han didn't mind. He arrived at the mountain wall, but his feet didn't stop, and he continued forward. When the experts saw this, they sneered. This was a mine, and why were even two great celestial kings fighting endlessly over it? It was because the ores here contained precious metal elements, and could be refined into rare metal that was second only to immortal metal. It was also because of this that the mountain rocks here were incredibly tough. To say nothing of the full power attacks of ascending origin tiers, it was impossible for them to be damaged. Even the full power attacks of celestial kings would only be able to create a small crack. You want to break in with your body? What a fool. But in the next moment, their eyes widened, revealing incomparably shocked expressions. Ling Han's body was like an iron ox entering the water, slowly submerging. It wasn't that the mountain wall had turned into water, but rather that Ling Han was like an unstoppable sharp weapon. He had forcefully cut open the mountain wall, causing powder to continuously fall down. This was because Ling Han was too strong, causing the mountain wall to shatter. It was too terrifying. He wasn't moving at high speed at all. He was just walking slowly, yet he could still cause such terrifying destruction. What kind of violent power was this? Everyone was trembling. Right now, they naturally didn't dare to make a move. If they did, they would only be courting death. Ling Han's body technique erupted. This was the essence power of the origin world that was refined from the energy of the void. Even if it was just a tiny bit, it still possessed incomparably terrifying destructive power. He forcefully broke through the mountain wall. He walked slowly. Others needed to put in a lot of effort to mine, but he only needed to walk casually. When his figure completely disappeared, the experts finally heaved a sigh of relief. What should we do? They looked at each other. They could feel the cold sweat on the foreheads of the others. This person isn't someone we can stop. Let's inform Lord Sect Leader. N. Immediately, someone returned to the Red Flower Sect to pass on the news. The distance wasn't far. Hence, in just 2 days, the Red Flower Sect Leader appeared. Although the sect's name was Red Flower, this sect leader wasn't a female. Instead, he was a real man. He was tall and sturdy, had a head of messy hair, and was bare-chested. Just by looking at him, who would have thought that he was actually a person with incomparably deep thoughts? He would need tens of millions of years to lay a trap before he would release his killing intent. He already knew the situation, but he still revealed an astonished expression when he saw the hole that Ling Han had left behind. The Red Flower Sect leader made a move and pressed his palm on the mountain wall. Swish, swish. Instantly, a large portion of the mountain wall turned into sand and fell down. Sect leader is mighty. When the experts arrived, they instantly cheered loudly. This greatly increased their morale. The Red Flower Sect leader also revealed a faint smile, but his heart was in a state of shock. This was because only he knew that although that attack just now seemed casual, it had actually consumed a lot of his strength. However, it was said that the mysterious person didn't even make a move. He just walked in, causing the sand and stones to fall. With this comparison, he knew that he was far inferior. Where did the Heavy Moon Sect find such a terrifying opponent? He wanted to give up, yet he was unwilling. After plotting for so long, was he going to give up without even seeing his opponent? At the very least, he had to wait for Ling Han to come out and see the situation first. He said in his heart. Speaking of which, Ling Han was strolling in the mountain, and he was sensing the location of divine metal. In fact, this entire mountain was mother metal and contained an astonishing amount of high-grade rare metal. This was a high-grade existential plane. In the celestial realm, below divine metal was divine metal. There was no transition, and one could only forge divine metal into pseudo-divine metal. However, there was divine metal here, and under the even stronger power of heaven and earth, the rare metal here far surpassed the level of divine metal. Thus, it was indeed possible for divine metal to be born here. Divine metal was of course celestial king tier, and it had special waves. Thus, Ling Han was capturing such waves. However, rare metal had a strong influence on Ling Han's divine sense, so the range that he could detect was limited. His progress wasn't fast. The mountain was too big, and who knew where divine metal was? Perhaps there wasn't any. Ling Han wasn't in a hurry. This was divine metal, something that every celestial king dreamed of. If it could be obtained too easily, what was there to rely on? Just as he thought this, he suddenly felt a fist-sized piece of green metal. This was no ordinary item at first glance, rising with dense celestial qi. Perhaps even ascending origin tiers wouldn't be able to approach it, and their bodies would directly explode. Divine Metal Ling Han was surprised. He had just said that divine metal couldn't be found so easily, but before he finished his thought, it appeared. I should be happy, right? Ling Han laughed and put away the divine metal. He didn't plan to let the divine demon sword swallow this piece of divine metal, nor did he plan to forge it into a weapon, but to forge it into a spatial god tool. No, a spatial god tool. Forged from divine metal? Then, unless a heavenly venerable moved, what need was there to worry about being beaten to death? Ever since the Black Tower fell silent, he had always been vexed about how to accommodate the people around him, because a battle that was too intense would damage the spatial god tool, causing him to be unable to wholeheartedly battle. You've really been a great help. He smiled and turned around to leave. Though he could forcibly carve out another path that would exhaust his physical strength, after all. Was there no point in wasting time? Less than half a day later, he came out from the original hole. Suddenly he felt a powerful aura rush over and couldn't help but walk forward. A tall, sturdy, and slovenly second heaven celestial king immediately came into view. The Red Flower sect leader. Ling Han's first reaction was to laugh, but then he thought that it was impolite to mock someone's appearance, so he forcibly suppressed it. However, he still couldn't help but take a few more glances at that celestial king. What a waste of this name. The Red Flower sect leader was also sizing up Ling Han, and he was even more shocked. He clearly didn't sense a powerful power of regulation from Ling Han's body, and the latter was really a genuine dark light tier. But this was also something that was completely impossible. It was only a glance, and his gaze was immediately drawn by the green divine metal in Ling Han's hand. Return my divine metal. Chapter 25:13. Ling Han faltered for a moment. Your divine gold? Your divine gold? He couldn't help but laugh out loud. In the first place, he had already been holding back his laughter due to the contrast between the other's appearance and title, and when he heard these words, he naturally spluttered with laughter. Oh, your name is written on it. The Red Flower sect leader humphed. This is the territory of my Red Flower sect. No matter what appears in this place, it belongs to my sect. Is that why you're being unreasonable? Ling Han asked calmly. I am being unreasonable, so what? The Red Flower sect leader humphed and waved a hand. Set up the formation. Suddenly, over 100 ascending origin tier level elites moved, a frightening killing intent circulating around them. The Red Flower sect leader couldn't help but show a smug expression. These few days, he hadn't been foolishly waiting for Ling Han to come out, but had made a great deal of arrangements, the most powerful of which was naturally a killing formation. If it had been another situation, what celestial king would charge headfirst into a formation that had been set up? But who asked Ling Han to walk right into the trap now, allowing him to set up the formation calmly? And because of this, he was brimming with confidence. Ling Han gave an "oh," and killing intent flowed out of the corners of his eyes. You're going to kill me? That's right, the Red Flower sect leader said darkly. The value of a celestial king was also infinite. Whether he was alive or dead, he had no intention of taking only a piece of divine gold. Ling Han shook his head. Then there's nothing more to say. Indeed, there's nothing more to say. Go. Shua, a flash of sword light streaked past, illuminating the skies. The Red Flower sect leader hadn't finished saying, "Go die," when his head had already been sliced off. Pung! The blood of a celestial king spurted out, causing the heaven and earth to mourn, and a rain of blood fell. Ling Han withdrew his sword. With his present strength, added with the sharpness of the divine demon sword, How difficult would it be to insta-kill a second heaven celestial king? The other elites of the Red Flower sect were still pushing the killing formation, but in the blink of an eye, their boss had been killed, causing them to all be dumbfounded. They couldn't help but stop, feeling a chill run down their spines. Continue pushing the killing formation. What a joke, even their sect master could only be killed in an instant. So what if they activated the killing formation? Could they do anything to the other party? It was better to take advantage of the fact that he hadn't attacked Ling Han yet and had a chance to save himself, so he quickly stopped and surrendered. These experts all knelt on the ground, not daring to move in the slightest. Ling Han glanced at them, but he didn't start a massacre. He didn't have the time right now. He left with large steps. After arriving at a city, he paid a high price to inquire about where he could refine immortal gold. How could ordinary flames possibly refine immortal metal? They had to go to the place where the origin flame of heaven and earth was the most vigorous. Many people thought of him as a fool, but with a great reward, there would always be a brave man. He still managed to find out some information. He set out. After a year of time, he arrived at a volcano that had long stopped erupting. The underground fire here was incomparably terrifying, able to refine immortal gold. What a powerful fire law. Ling Han nodded. It was no wonder that immortal metal could be smelted here. If one's true body leaped into the center of the earth fire, even a ninth heaven immortal king would be burned to ashes. Ling Han didn't waste any time, immediately starting to refine immortal gold. This was just a rough embryo, and there were many impurities within. After all, it had to be refined first, and then forged into a spatial immortal artifact. Otherwise, its sturdiness would be affected. He came near the fire core and used his great ability to extract the earth fire to refine immortal gold. The speed wasn't fast. Even though this earth fire was incomparably terrifying, immortal gold was still immortal gold. How could it be refined so easily? Ling Han gazed at the seething earth fire. The flaming seals on the surface of the earth fire flickered, causing him to feel an urge to leap into the earth fire and absorb the boundless energy to refine himself. However, he suppressed this urge. He wasn't immortal gold. Immortal gold couldn't be destroyed and could only change shape. However, if he was refined, then he would really die. The temperature here was too high. Ling Han's physique could endure it, but the women couldn't. Even if they stayed in the spatial god tool, it was useless. Here, even if they were just slightly close to the fire core, the spatial god tool would directly melt. They all stayed outside. Ling Han spent most of his time refining immortal gold, but every few days, he would take some time to stay with the women. After all, this was an unfamiliar place, so he had to be careful. He first recovered his physique, and then drew on the regulations of time to accelerate the flow of time. In this way, the speed at which he refined immortal gold was greatly increased. More than 100 years later, Ling Han finally smiled. He succeeded. He completely purified the immortal gold, and it was even slightly smaller than a fist. He made it into a small box, and the inside was sealed with the regulations of space, creating a small world. This small world wasn't very big, because Ling Han's grasp of the regulations of space was far from recovering, so the ability of the severing mundane tier was naturally limited. However, the beauty of immortal gold was that it could be molded. As long as his cultivation level increased, he naturally could continue to expand the space inside the celestial tool. Ling Han left, and put the women into the spatial celestial tool. Then he himself entered. He still had to modify this world, making it more suitable for living. Now, this place was empty. Ling Han moved a large number of mountains and land, as well as large rivers. He didn't consider the sea for now, because the space here wasn't very big. He didn't have to deliberately plant flowers and trees, because the mountains and plains he moved here already had a large number of them. Of course, there were also many animals and insects here. Ling Han used his great ability to create the sun, moon, and stars, and there was the change of day and night. Ling Han was very satisfied. Though this wasn't perfect enough, there were endless possibilities, and he could modify it as he wished. Moreover, this was a treasure that truly belonged to him, so he didn't have to worry about it betraying him like the Black Tower. It's time to go to the #1 martial arts academy in the world. He set out, diligently cultivating as he went. After more than 100 years, he also advanced into the dividing soul tier, but the higher his cultivation level, the slower his advancement. Even if he was a celestial king, the regulations here were different, and the level was higher, so how could he advance so quickly? If he wanted to return to the celestial king tier, he would need at least 10,000 years, right? Ling Han thought. Perhaps this was all an optimistic estimate, but one naturally had to be more optimistic. After spending 7 years on the road, Ling Han finally neared the location of the #1 martial arts academy in the world. The fiery frost plane was a super high-level plane, and also the most powerful plane in the entire origin world. Its area was also ridiculously large, at least 100 times larger than the celestial realm. This was still Ling Han's speculation based on the information he had now. In reality, it could be even larger. The #1 martial arts academy in the world was on the Boundless Mountain. Ling Han was now in a small town at the foot of the Boundless Mountain, and he was thinking about how to enter this martial arts academy. Yes, he knew Celestial Venerable Zhou Heng, but was this Celestial Venerable not busy, and could he see him whenever he wanted? Furthermore, Ling Han wasn't someone who liked to trouble others. He was indeed late because of his personal reasons, so he wanted to solve it himself. If the martial arts academy was still recruiting, he would rely on his own strength to enter. Even though his present cultivation level wasn't high, how domineering were his body techniques? Merely based on this, entering the martial arts academy would be no problem. He was having a small drink in a restaurant. No matter which plane it was, this kind of place was always the most convenient for gathering information. Brother, let's share a table. Chapter 25:14. Ling Han raised his head and saw 2 men standing by the table. They were both very young, but their cultivation level had reached the ascending origin tier. They were not simple at all. One of them had a sword at his waist, and he cracked a smile. It's full. If you don't mind, let's go together. In return, we'll take you to the top martial arts academy in the world. How about it? Without waiting for Ling Han to agree, the 2 of them sat down, and then began to chat loudly, acting very familiar with each other. Of the 2 of them, one was called Su Chang, and the other was called Tang Qi. They were both going to the top martial arts academy to become the followers of those students. Not to be their subordinates, but those students were all well-known figures of their own realm. Following them would bring endless benefits. Of course, this also required competition. It was not something one could become just because they wanted to. Brother Ling, your cultivation level is too weak. No student would be willing to take you as a follower, Tang Qi said solemnly. He thought that Ling Han was the same. Ling Han shook his head. I'm not going to be someone's follower. This was the truth. He didn't want to be anyone's follower, but rather a student. However, Su Chang and Tang Qi naturally wouldn't think so. Instead, they thought that Ling Han knew his own limits. They were also people of character. After a few cups of wine, they patted their chests and promised that they would definitely take Ling Han there to broaden his horizons. Brother, whether you can be a follower or not is a small matter. This place has become a market, and there are strange things for sale here every day, Su Chang said. If you're lucky and find something good, you'll strike it rich. Ling Han gave an "oh," smiled and said, then we'll go. Of course. Those students will occasionally go to the market. If we're lucky and one of them picks us, won't we be able to soar to the skies? Tang Qi was also very excited. After they finished eating, they set off, heading towards that so-called market. Not long after, they arrived at the place. Sure enough, there were as many people as an ocean. In fact, this was an empty space, but now there were many stalls set up, and they were all neatly arranged. Each row was several hundred meters long, and there were at least several hundred rows. How many stalls and people were there? Every stall was surrounded by many people, rummaging and picking. Star stones were basically used to buy things here. However, even if there were no star stones, one could still use items to exchange for them as long as both parties were willing. With Ling Han's current cultivation, he could smash down the stars in the sky with a single punch. So, he still had some star stones with him, but not many of them. However, when he was refining the immortal metal at the fire core, he had also refined some fire attribute crystals. For cultivators who cultivated the great path of fire, these were rare items. He, Tang Qi, and Su Chang wandered around, searching one stall after another. Tang Qi and Su Chang found something, but Ling Han didn't find anything. However, it was not that the quality of the items here was too low. Rather, it was because Ling Han's current cultivation level was too high. He did not care about ordinary treasures at all. If they wanted to tempt him, they would have to be something like immortal metal, right? There were celestial medicines here, but there wasn't a single one that had reached the Celestial King level. Who would sell them here? Ling Han was a little disappointed, but then he thought, if good things were so easy to find, would there still be a share for him? With this thought, he calmed down. However, after 10 consecutive days, he still did not find anything. At this moment, a commotion suddenly arose in the crowd in the distance. What's going on? What's going on? Tang Qi was curious. He stood on his tiptoes and looked around. After a while, they found out that a student from the martial arts institution had come. That was why this commotion had arisen. Many people went over to curry favor with him, hoping to be chosen by him and become his follower. Duo Ka, Tang Qi said. I think he came from the Pajuan dimension 9 million years ago. He is of the Arch. It is said that he reached the second firmament of the Celestial King realm not long ago. Celestial King? Tsk. Su Chang's face was full of envy. He and Tang Qi only had the potential of a king tier. It was extremely difficult for them to become a Celestial King. Furthermore, if this wasn't a super high-level dimension, it was completely impossible for a king tier to become a Celestial King. They had to rely on their own efforts. As Duo Ka walked, he caused a commotion in the nearby people. They all tried to curry favor with him. Some stall owners even let him choose for free. However, Duo Ka did not take anything at all. He was a Celestial King. There were really too few things that could attract him. Ling Han retracted his gaze. Amir the Arch naturally would not attract his attention. He continued to sweep the goods. When he came to the next stall, he targeted a furnace. This furnace was very old and covered in dust. Even if it was thrown on the roadside, probably no one would pick it up. Ling Han did not think that there was anything special about this furnace. Instead, he thought that since it could be brought here to be sold, it should not be a really useless furnace, right? He picked up the furnace and began to study it carefully. The stall owner was a middle-aged man. He glanced at Ling Han but did not stop him. He only said, I found this furnace in an ancient tomb. It is very sturdy. Ling Han smiled and said, Can I use force to try? Sure. The middle-aged man nodded. Go ahead. If you really break it, you do not have to pay for it. All right. Ling Han nodded and then slapped the furnace. The furnace let out a muffled sound, but the wall did not tremble at all. Interesting. Ling Han could feel that this was not refined from immortal metal. Immortal metal had a special aura, like that of an immortal king. However, this furnace was filled with a strong death aura. It did not have the vitality and nobility of immortal metal at all. But no matter what, just based on this degree of toughness, this thing was very extraordinary. Could it be used as a pill furnace? Ling Han thought. The requirement for a pill furnace was that it had to be fire-resistant and not easily broken. He was about to speak when he heard another commotion in front of him. They've started fighting. Tang Qi was very excited. It's Duoka and Yang Zhishuan. They seem to have gotten into an ancient object and refused to give way to each other. In the end, a huge battle broke out. Hiss, Yang Zhishuan. Su Chang gasped. Ling Han asked casually, Is Yang Zhishuan also a student? No. He is not a student. He is just a follower. Tang Qi shook his head, his expression solemn. He was just a follower. What was so great about that? He is Lord Tianqing's follower, Su Chang added. His tone and expression were filled with awe. Ling Han's heart skipped a beat. Tianqing? Yang Zhishuan is an immortal king, and he's at the second heavenly layer. He's an illustrious existence no matter where he goes, but he's willing to follow Lord Tianqing, Tang Qi said, working together with Su Chang. We can't let this happen to Yang Zhishuan. Of course, what is more terrifying is that Lord Tianxing is able to make an immortal king willingly follow him. Su Chang's expression was one of extreme admiration. Indeed, an immortal king could dominate anywhere, but now he had become someone's follower. This was definitely big news. It served as a foil to Tianxing's strength and monstrous talent. Let's go watch the fun. The stall owner temporarily stopped selling things. He snatched the furnace from Ling Han's hands, packed everything into his spatial divine tool, and immediately squeezed forward. Since that was the case, Ling Han also followed the crowd to watch the fun. Chapter 25:16. To most people, the immortal king realm was something that they could only dream of. Therefore, it was everyone's dream to be able to reach such a height. Su Chang's face was also full of yearning. He agreed with Tang Qi's words and didn't tease his companion anymore. Ling Han laughed and said, "As long as you work hard, there might be a glimmer of hope." "Tisage, what kind of cultivation do you have? You're actually comforting us?" Su Chang and Tang Qi both sneered. They recovered and smiled mischievously. If Ling Han was willing, he only needed to give them one immortal seed each, and they would immediately become immortal kings. It was just that they would never have any room for improvement. But he had left all the immortals in the immortal region, and he wasn't that generous. These two weren't good enough to be his friends, and Ling Han wasn't a spendthrift either. He couldn't help but wonder how good his business would be if he sold immortals here. But did this place have a path to immortality? Without a path to immortality, how could he obtain immortal seeds? And without immortal seeds, how could he refine immortals? Forget it, he'd better not think about this. He returned to the place where the old man was and picked up the furnace. "How much is this?" 100 million star stones, the middle-aged man said, and even raised a finger to emphasize. "Why don't you just rob someone?" Tang Qi almost went crazy. This furnace didn't have any power. What was the use of being sturdy? Was he going to use this thing to smash people? "If you want it, then this is the price. I'm not forcing you to buy it." The middle-aged man sneered and ignored Tang Qi as if he was looking down on him. "I'm so angry," Tang Qi shouted. Ling Han didn't have that many star stones on hand. He thought about it and said, "I don't have that many star stones, but do you need this thing?" He took out a fire-type crystal and handed it to the middle-aged man. The man was a bit careless, mainly because Ling Han's cultivation level was too low, so what good things could he take out? But the moment he took the fire element crystal stone, he gave a loud cry and almost dropped the crystal stone. Hot, it was really too hot. "What are you doing? If you break it, can you afford to pay for it?" Tang Qi found an opportunity to scold the middle-aged man. Then he bent down to pick up the crystal. But just as he picked it up, he couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. "Pa!" The crystal stone was also thrown out by him. Su Chang burst out laughing. "I say, old Tang, you don't have to tease people like this, do you? You're even imitating others to throw things. This is Brother Ling's. If it's really broken, how are you going to pay for it?" He bent down to pick it up, but as soon as his hand touched it, he immediately cried out in alarm, and his face turned green. It was too hot. Was that a crystal? It was simply a flame essence. The middle-aged man came back to his senses. His expression was solemn as he walked out of the stall. He stretched out his right hand again, but this time, his hand was wrapped in the laws and he grabbed the crystal. Instantly, a look of wild joy appeared on his face. Is this a condensed form of the regulations of fire? It contains a terrifying great Tao of fire. If there's enough of it, I can even capture the complete great Tao of fire and step into the celestial king realm. Tang Qi and Su Chang were both astonished. This ridiculously hot crystal was actually so awesome. After looking at each other, they both shook their heads. One of them cultivated in the wood element regulations, while the other cultivated in the earth element. Neither of them were compatible with the fire element. "You used your hand to take it out just now. Why isn't your hand scalded?" Tang Qi wasn't stupid either. He immediately thought of something illogical and looked at Ling Han in surprise. Su Chang was also astonished. He hurriedly grabbed Ling Han's hand and spread it out. It was as warm as jade, and there wasn't the slightest scar. Strange, strange. He hurriedly grabbed Ling Han's other hand, and it was still the same. Even the middle-aged man clicked his tongue in wonder. They had all tested the might of this crystal. Even using regulations to wrap around it was somewhat strenuous. They could still feel the terrifying heat, but they could just barely endure it. Ling Han's cultivation was so low. How had he managed to do it? Ling Han smiled and said, "Perhaps I'm thick-skinned." This was the truth. His physique was at the second layer of the heavens, and this was only refined from the earth fire. Its might naturally couldn't compare to the mother fire, so he could easily endure it. "How many of these crystals do you have?" the middle-aged man asked. He was tempted, but he couldn't be bothered to find out why Ling Han wasn't scalded. There were always many things in this world that couldn't be explained. 10 pieces, said Ling Han. The number of fire element crystal stones in his possession was naturally more than this, but wasn't it necessary to bargain when doing business? He wasn't some boy who would give away his fortune. The middle-aged man hesitated. He had found this furnace in an ancient tomb, and it should have been several epochs ago. He had asked someone to examine some of the other items inside, and they had confirmed that it was this old. He firmly believed that this furnace wasn't simple, which was why he had offered a high price of 100 million star stones. However, he truly couldn't tell what other advantages this furnace had other than its sturdiness. He also didn't have enough confidence. If it was 10 pieces, then so be it. He didn't want to wait any longer. Okay, deal. He gritted his teeth and nodded in agreement. Wait. At this moment, a large hand reached over and grabbed the furnace. When they were bargaining just now, the middle-aged man had also taken the furnace back. He didn't have any reaction at all, and the furnace was about to fall into the other party's hands. Bang! Yet Ling Han shot out a kick, landing on the middle-aged man's body. A skillful force surged forth, causing him to involuntarily twist his body, dodging that large hand. Ha! The person who had attacked revealed a look of surprise. The other party had dodged too coincidentally, and he had actually missed. It was very inconceivable. Lord Yang Jixuan, Tang Qi and Su Chang exclaimed at the same time. The person who had interfered was actually Yang Jixuan. Yang Jixuan was also seized by a sudden impulse. After seeing this furnace, his heart was moved. He also didn't know what was so good about this furnace, but since he was moved, he had to take it and study it no matter what. Leave it to me, he said in a low voice, and the might of an immortal king vibrated. The middle-aged man couldn't help but shiver. He said, "But Lord, I've already sold this furnace to him." He pointed at Ling Han. He didn't soften just because he was frightened. He still had some principles. Yang Jixuan glanced at Ling Han, his eyes full of disdain. How could such a small fry compete with him? What a joke. He frowned. How many star stones? I'll double it. This. The middle-aged man muttered to himself. In fact, he needed fire-type star stones more, which gave him a sliver of a chance to advance to Immortal King. Ling Han snorted and said, "If you came a step earlier, then it would be a fair competition, and the highest bidder would get it. But now that we've already negotiated a price, you still want to buy it. You really don't know the rules." These words made Su Chang and Tang Qi's faces instantly turn pale. That was Yang Jixuan. Putting aside his status as a follower, he was also an immortal king. He had even defeated an official student who was also a second heaven immortal king. Talking back to him would result in a tragic death. Chapter 25:17. Yang Jixuan also didn't expect Ling Han to dare speak to him like this. He was slightly startled and then came to his senses. He wasn't angry. Did a mighty celestial king need to care about what this kind of minor character said? He could just smack him to death. However, such a hothead was really rare, which aroused his interest, and he said, "Brat, don't you know that in this world, the strong are revered? My cultivation level is tens of thousands of miles higher than yours, and I can crush you with one finger. Aren't you afraid?" Ling Han laughed, raised his right hand, and clenched it into a fist. "I can kill you with one punch. Do you believe it?" Yang Jixuan was startled again, and then laughed loudly. Where did this hothead come from? This was really too fun. Precisely because of this, he didn't have any intention to kill. With just a thought, it turned into a sword and pierced towards Ling Han. He only wanted to make Ling Han suffer a little and let him remember this lesson. Wang, the tip of the sword immediately reached Ling Han's chest. Ling Han moved. Ping, a punch landed on the tip of the sword, and instantly, the whole sword immediately shattered. Before Yang Zhixian could react, this punch followed the momentum, and peng, it landed on Yang Zhixian's chin. A figure suddenly soared into the sky, and instantly became a small black dot. What's going on? There were naturally people on the side, and they couldn't help but grimace, their expressions blank. Where was Yang Zhixian? Why did he suddenly run away? Even if they were beaten to death, they wouldn't believe that this was sent flying by Ling Han. Even Su Chang and Tang Qi didn't believe it. Moreover, with their vision, it was naturally impossible to capture such a trajectory. One had to know that even Yang Zhixian couldn't react in time, so what was a mere ascending origin tier? They all thought that Yang Zhixian had left on his own, perhaps because of some urgent matter. This celestial king was really magnanimous. Though he had run away because of urgent matters, he still wanted to give Ling Han a slap in passing. Killing him would be as easy as killing a mosquito. But he didn't, so how magnanimous was he? Damn it! Just as everyone was exclaiming in admiration, Yang Zhishuan appeared with a roar. His chin was obviously swollen and there was blood at the corner of his mouth. When he opened his mouth, it could be seen that he was missing a few teeth. What's going on? Could it be that Yang Zhishuan ran away in a hurry just now because he had a fight with someone? But this fight ended too quickly, and it was over just like that. Moreover, who was he shouting at? Ling Han ignored him. He originally wanted to kill Yang Zhishuan with one punch, but since the other party didn't kill him, he showed some mercy and just taught him a lesson. To be honest, there was no deep hatred between the two sides. He took out another 9 fire elemental crystals and handed them to the middle-aged man. Then, he took the furnace and put it away in his spatial celestial artifact. I really underestimated you, pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. Good job, Yang Zhishuan said in a cold voice. He was really too careless to be hit by Ling Han's punch. At least he thought so. What? Hearing this, everyone was so shocked that their scalps went numb. Could it be that the punch on his face was from Ling Han? If that wasn't the case, why would he say such a thing? But how was this possible? What cultivation level did Ling Han have? If he could send a celestial king flying with a single punch, wouldn't the entire martial art realm be thrown into chaos? Only then did Ling Han raise his head and glance at Yang Zhishuan. If you want to talk, do it while standing on the ground. Don't you know that this is very impolite? Yang Zhishuan was furious. I'm so impolite, so punching me is already polite. He said in a cold voice, let's fight in the sky. There were too many passers-by here. Although it was fine to kill a few, if he committed too many sins, there would definitely be high-level celestial kings coming to deal with him. Ling Han frowned. You still haven't learned your lesson? Cut the crap. Yang Zhishuan shouted. Peng, Ling Han immediately shot up, and a huge force erupted from his legs. He didn't rush into the sky with the power of regulations, but rather with brute force. His speed was astonishingly fast. He couldn't use the power of regulations to fly, because he was only at the dividing soul tier. His flying speed was astonishingly slow. If he fought with such a method, would he be able to hit anyone? His speed was too fast. In a flash, he appeared in front of Yang Zhishuan. Then, Ling Han punched out again. Xiao, Yang Zhishuan was sent flying again. Boom, another loud sound rang out. Ling Han landed, and a huge pit was formed in the ground. The people in the surroundings were all shaken by the shockwaves, and all of them were thrown off their feet. Everyone was dumbfounded. Although they still didn't know Zhu Xiu's situation, there was no doubt that Yang Zhishuan had been sent flying again. And the person who had attacked was none other than Ling Han. Hiss, my dear mother. Su Chang and Tang Qi were also so shocked that their scalps went numb. They also had an indescribable feeling. Thinking about how they had called Ling Han brothers before, and had even laughed at Ling Han, but who knew that he hadn't lied at all? They were actually on equal footing with this kind of existence. Would anyone believe them if they said this? But Yang Jishuan was sent flying again. This time, his face was completely disfigured and covered in blood. He looked savage and pathetic. He glared at Ling Han, his eyes filled with rage, and they were about to burn. Extraordinary humiliation, extraordinary humiliation. Previously, he had defeated Doka, and it could be said that he had obtained great fame. A follower had defeated an official student. But now, he had been punched twice by a nobody who wasn't even a celestial king. The ups and downs of life were really too exciting. However, the second punch finally made him realize how powerful Ling Han was. He definitely couldn't win just by being a little more careful. He humphed, and his battle armor reappeared, wrapping around him. With this, his confidence instantly soared. Under the protection of the battle armor, he was already in an invincible position. "Do you dare to fight me?" he challenged loudly. Ling Han was somewhat excited. He really wanted to know how strong this battle armor was, and how many punches it could take. Ping, he once again exploded with power, and his whole body shot up into the sky. Yang Jishuan had no time to react at all, and an iron fist had already landed on his chest. Under the crushing force of the fist, the runes on the battle armor lit up, forming a layer of light patterns on the surface of the armor. This had a powerful protective effect, and was the first layer of defense of the battle armor. However, when the fist smashed down, this layer of light patterns immediately shattered, and it didn't have the slightest effect at all. The fist continued to smash down, and if time was slowed down by 10,000 times, it could be seen that the armor collapsed, turning into a huge depression. Finally, unable to withstand the force, it collapsed and shattered. Just as Ling Han had thought before, as long as the power was violent enough, exceeding the limit of the self-recovery ability of the battle armor, it could be completely destroyed by violence. Ling Han roared, waving his hands, and the battle armor was easily torn off as if it were made of cloth. Yang Jishuan was like a weak little girl, his mouth wide open, unable to make the slightest sound. Although it was only the battle armor that had been torn off, he felt as if his clothes had been torn off, leaving him naked in front of everyone, and he felt extremely ashamed. Below, everyone was stunned. Tearing battle armor with your bare hands, could you not be so violent? Chapter 25:18. Previously, everyone was just guessing how powerful Ling Han was. After all, they didn't see the moment Ling Han attacked Yang Jishuan. But it was different now. Everyone saw it clearly. How powerful was this battle armor? Everyone knew that after Yang Jishuan put it on, he even defeated Doka. Originally, he was no match for him. This wasn't an immortal artifact, but it was second only to immortal artifacts. It was extremely precious and rare. But now, it was torn to shreds with bare hands. Who could believe it? This scene was like a myth. Even if they saw it with their own eyes, they still couldn't believe their eyes. Ling Han tore the battle armor into pieces and couldn't help but shake his head. This battle armor was originally very sturdy, but in reality, it was only so. It could provide an extremely good defensive effect, and that was because the patterns of light formed by the seals on the battle armor were very powerful. Of course, if the suppression of strength wasn't too great, it would really be indestructible, and it had the ability to repair itself. Ling Han smiled. "Do you still want to fight?" Yang Jishuan shook his head subconsciously. If he couldn't even withstand one move from Ling Han with the battle armor on, then what was the point of fighting? Most importantly, Ling Han still looked extremely weak. This contrast was too big, and no one could accept it. Ling Han slowly descended from the sky. It wasn't that he didn't want to be fast, but if he wanted to fly, he could only use the power of laws. But at the height of laws, he was already so fast when he was only at the dividing soul realm. Everyone was speechless. Ling Han was at the dividing soul realm, but he could defeat an immortal king. Lord Ling. When Tang Qi and Su Chang saw Ling Han descend and walk towards them, they couldn't help but become extremely cautious. This was a freakish individual who could easily defeat even a second heaven celestial king. How could they dare to call Ling Han brothers? Ling Han smiled slightly and didn't say anything fancy. His strength was indeed much stronger than Tang Qi and Su Chang. In this world with strict hierarchy, they couldn't get along equally. It's been a pleasure getting along with the two of you. If you encounter any trouble in the future, you can come to the martial courtyard to find me, he said to the two. Thank you, milord. The two of them were overjoyed. Regardless of whether or not they would be able to see Ling Han in the future, just the fact that they had said such words to Ling Han in front of so many people would have to be careful. If they did anything to the two of them, Ling Han would take revenge on them. Ling Han nodded. He believed that after this battle, someone from the Martial Institute would definitely come out to see him. He left the market and returned to the small town, waiting for the people of the Martial Institute to come over. Since he had nothing to do, he changed his appearance and went to the restaurant. At present, he still didn't understand the situation of the martial courtyard very well. He sat in the restaurant and listened to the people talking loudly. If you want to say who is the most powerful among the new disciples, I think it's Fire Hibiscus. Someone was drunk and was arguing with others. It said that she has an origin flame in her body. Just this alone is enough for her to crush immortal kings of the same level. Moreover, her strength is indescribably strong. It said that her evolution index is close to 12. His voice was very loud, and it caused the surrounding customers to let out an "oh" sound. There were pitifully few people with evolution indexes above 10, let alone someone with an evolution index close to 12. I said that Ji Wuming is the strongest. Someone disagreed. In a short 1 million years, he has soared from the first layer to the third layer. Who can compare to such progress? I said that Lord Luanxing is the strongest, not for any other reason, but because Lord Luanxing is the most beautiful, unparalleled throughout the ages. Someone else shouted. This point of view actually won the approval of many people, and they all nodded. Even those people who had pushed Fire Hibiscus and Ji Wuming had to admit that Luanxing was indeed ridiculously beautiful. Ling Han laughed in his heart. His wife was indeed stunningly beautiful, and it made him feel very proud. Wrong. Although these people are very strong, which one of them can compare to Lord Tianxing? A drunk person suddenly stood up. Immediately, the restaurant became deathly silent. That's a demon king. Just because someone cursed him behind his back, he destroyed an entire city as revenge, someone said with a pale face. But his talent is too high. 2 heavenly venerables actually fought to take him as a disciple, and they even started fighting. Even someone as strong as Fire Hibiscus is only at the 3rd layer. But Lord Tianxing is already at the 5th layer. This kind of advancement is unprecedented. No one can compare to him. His strength has already far surpassed his peers. Only the geniuses of the older generation can compare to him. For example, Amu and Waning Moon. The customers all reported their names. Any one of them was an existence that could cause heaven and earth to lose their luster. They've long since reached the peak of the 9th layer and are only a step away from becoming heavenly venerables. All they need is an opportunity. Everyone nodded. Their innate strength was far beyond those in the same realm. I heard that there's another genius in that plane who had Lord Zhou Heng leave behind a planar teleportation talisman. With how heavy it is, it shouldn't be any weaker than Lord Tianxing's, someone suddenly said. Ling Han's ears perked up. Weren't they talking about him? When the others heard this, they clicked their tongues in wonder. Zhou Heng was a 6th-step heavenly venerable, which was practically the strongest level. His every move naturally attracted attention. Why did I hear that he's already dead? Someone else said disdainfully. I also heard that he was enemies with Lord Tianxing, but he was killed by him. He deserved to die for being enemies with Lord Tianxing. If he's still alive, then why hasn't he appeared after 1,000,000 years? He's just a dead person. So what if his talent is astonishing? He's worthless. A great many people began to shake their heads, appearing extremely disdainful of Ling Han. Ling Han was displeased. None of you have ever seen me, so how do you know I'm useless? He was innately strong because he was equivalent to an incarnation of the immortal region. His physique was astonishing, and he had also been tempered by intrinsic power. His combat strength was terrifying. This was because his natural conditions were outstanding. One had to know that the immortal region was only a low-level plane, and it was an extremely low-level plane. He had cheated to create such an incarnation, but there would always be a limit to his growth. The second step, Heavenly Venerable, could support the heavens. Next, he would have to rely on his own efforts and opportunities to increase his cultivation level. If he wanted to suppress Tianxing, he had to have an advantage in cultivation level at this stage. When he became a Heavenly Venerable, the advantage of his physique would no longer exist. Divine metal couldn't completely block the destructive power of a Heavenly Venerable. Ling Han was confident in himself. Moreover, he would diligently cultivate the indestructible Heaven Scroll, striving to reach the level of divine metal. Then, when he faced Tianxing again, at least he wouldn't be at a disadvantage. He suddenly had a thought. Before he cultivated the indestructible Heaven Scroll to the extreme, he definitely wouldn't reveal his true identity. Otherwise, what if he encountered Tianxing? He could only flee. He didn't want to be so passive, so hiding his identity should be a good choice. He quietly got up and didn't return to the inn. Instead, he strode out of the town, heading directly to the No. 1 Martial Arts Academy. Chapter 25-20. Peng, a palm pressed down, triggering a powerful ripple of laws. The black-robed immortal king was about to turn back into the mist, but his eyes suddenly popped out. Had he seen a ghost? Ling Han was standing there, perfectly fine, and even smiled at him. However, this smile didn't make him feel cordial. Instead, his scalp was about to explode. How was this possible? So you've hidden yourself so deeply. The black-robed immortal king immediately understood. To be able to block this move, it meant that Ling Han's strength had definitely reached the immortal king realm. In that case, no matter how he didn't look like an immortal king, he was an immortal king. Otherwise, there was no other possibility. Ling Han smiled faintly. What did I do to provoke you? Why do you insist on killing me? You're clearly an immortal king, yet you're pretending to be mysterious. You deserve to die. The black-robed immortal king said coldly. Even if Ling Han was a 9th heaven immortal king, he wasn't afraid because the 9 extremes formation restricted the cultivation of immortal kings. Here, everyone was a 1st heaven immortal king. So what did he have to fear? Ling Han laughed. I'm at ease now that you've said that. I can kill you without any psychological pressure. I'm quite a friendly person, unlike you. Not only are your clothes black, but your heart is black as well. The black-robed immortal king's expression darkened. Immortal kings were all very solemn, yet Ling Han actually dared to tease him. How unruly! He didn't speak anymore, but stared intently at Ling Han, killing intent swirling around him. Just kill him. What's with all this nonsense? He attacked. Boom, his hand transformed into a black sun, emitting a scorching aura that could easily melt high-grade pseudo-immortal metal. This was the lunar essence flame. Ling Han was shocked. This lunar essence flame wasn't something that anyone could casually refine. One had to have an extremely deep understanding of the great Tao of fire. In his opinion, to be able to refine the lunar essence flame, one had to be a monarch. And a monarch could not pass the 9 extremes formation and enter the academy? You didn't refine this yourself, right? Ling Han said as he casually punched out. Peng, that black sun immediately exploded. It was unable to withstand the might of his attack. The black-robed immortal king turned pale with fright. Not only was his ultimate technique neutralized, his secret was even exposed by his opponent. His lunar essence flame was indeed not refined by himself. Instead, he had entered the tomb of an ancient immortal king and obtained it from his remains. A dignified immortal king actually wanted to use a corpse? Now that he had been called out by Ling Han, he could not help but feel angry and ashamed, even if Ling Han did not know where this lunar essence flame had come from. Then he felt a chill down his spine. How terrifying was the lunar essence flame! Even he didn't dare to touch it, because he didn't refine it himself. He just stored it away like a precious artifact, and when he needed it, he would release it. He trembled. How strong was his opponent's battle prowess to have such might? You are the person who defeated Yang Zhishuan with a single punch. The black-robed immortal king suddenly had a flash of inspiration. After this news spread out, it caused a huge controversy. Most people thought this was just a rumor. Because how could a person who had not even reached the Celestial King realm do all this? Now, he also encountered such a monster. His cultivation was so low that people didn't even bother to look at him, but his strength was incomparably tyrannical. Ling Han broke into a grin. You've guessed correctly. However, if you make another guess, will I spare you? If the black-robed immortal king did not deliberately come back from the fog to kill him, then he would not care about such a small character. But the black-robed immortal king not only wanted to kill him, but also took action. Thus, he naturally could not be merciful. This was completely different from Yang Jishuan's situation. The black-robed immortal king rolled his eyes and suddenly turned to leave. He rushed into the fog. This fog had a powerful isolating effect. Even if two immortal kings entered hand in hand, they would unknowingly be separated and could only rely on their own strength to barge through. Hence, as long as he entered the fog, he would be absolutely safe. In the future, he would also leave this place and not encounter this baleful star again. Hee, can you escape? Ling Han laughed lightly. Exerting strength in his legs, he erupted forth with terrifying speed and caught up to the black-robed immortal king in a flash. He then punched out, aiming for the black-robed immortal king's back. The black-robed immortal king was incomparably shocked. He hurriedly channeled all his energy into his back, wanting to forcefully endure this attack and then borrow the force from it to rush deeper into the fog. This was his only path of survival. Bang! With a single punch, the protective energy of the black-robed immortal king was like paper, instantly breaking apart. This fist was like a hot knife through butter, directly penetrating through the chest of the black-robed immortal king, emerging from his chest. The black-robed immortal king was still running, yet he discovered that his energy was rapidly leaving his body. He stared dumbly at the fist that suddenly appeared in front of his chest. His eyes dimmed and his head tilted as he died. Boom! A rain of blood fell from the sky. Ling Han casually tossed the black-robed immortal king's corpse to the side, but he didn't forget to search his body. There was naturally no reason for him to waste his spoils of war. He didn't spare a second glance and left in large strides. This wasn't the first time he killed an immortal king. There was no need for him to place it in his heart. Brother Lin, how's your brat? In the martial courtyard, two young men were currently playing chess. Their bodies weren't shrouded in light and they seemed like ordinary people. However, their eyes were incomparably sharp, causing even the heavens and earth to tremble under their gaze. Brother Lin smiled. This brat has obtained a heavenly fortune. He is clearly only at the third heavenly level of the immortal king realm, yet his innate essence has already been tempered and his combat prowess is shocking. However, he isn't someone who would stay put and start a massacre the moment he arrived. The other young man laughed. This is someone brought back by your junior apprentice brother Zhou. In the future, if he also enters Lord Lin's tutelage, your faction would surely be heaven-defying. He counted on his fingers and said, Your esteemed father is a 7th-step celestial venerable. Brother Lin, you are a 6th-step celestial venerable. Brother Zhou Heng and Brother Chu Hao are also 6th-step celestial venerables. Including this brat, your faction has 5 celestial venerables, and all of them have a chance of reaching the 7th step. Brother Lin laughed loudly and shook his head. Although junior apprentice Brother Zhou, Chu Hao, and I are all 6th-step celestial venerables, it is as difficult as ascending to the heavens to reach the 7th step. This brat's innate conditions are indeed very good. It isn't difficult for him to become a celestial venerable, but he might not be able to reach the 6th step or even the 7th step. He still needs good fortune. The other young man nodded in agreement. To become a celestial venerable, it wasn't just a matter of talent. There were also many complicated conditions. If someone were to hear their conversation, they would definitely explode in shock. This was because from what they were saying, they were both celestial venerables, and one of them was a 6th-step celestial venerable. That's right, this Brother Lin was named Lin Xiaoyang. He was the son of the 7th-step celestial venerable Lin Luo. The other person's name was Fu Lin. Both of them were 6th-step celestial venerables. However, The one I admire the most is still Brother Lin, said Fu Liyun with a smile. Brother Lin's martial art talent isn't outstanding. Back then, you were far behind your two senior apprentice brothers. Now that you have caught up, you might even have a chance of breaking through to the 7th step first. Lin Xiaoyang shook his head with a smile. That's because my father spent a lot of effort on me. Junior apprentice brother Zhou and junior apprentice brother Chu Hao are well prepared. Once they erupt in the future, their accomplishments won't be inferior to my father's. As for me, the 6th step should be my limit. Reading on a cell phone is more refreshing. Chapter 25-21. Brother Lin, you really don't have to care about this kid. Fu Liyun changed the topic back to Ling Han. Lin Xiaoyang smiled, placed a piece, and said, that kid is very opinionated. Junior brother Zhou also said that we just need to give him time to grow. All right. Fu Liyun nodded, and then said, I'm going to take that fiery girl as my disciple. You won't fight with me for her again, right? Yang Xiaoyang couldn't help but laugh. No, absolutely not. Fu Liyun nodded in satisfaction and responded. Lin Xiaoyang felt strange and said, Brother Fu, why don't you choose innate? Fu Liyun shook his head. At this stage, innate is indeed more outstanding, but he is condensed from the will and essence of a plane. Although he has a huge advantage in terms of innate conditions, I estimate that the 3rd step of Celestial Venerable is his limit, and who knows how many centuries later. Lin Xiaoyang gave a thumbs up and praised, Brother Fu is really thorough. My father's evaluation of this person is the same. Moreover, this kid has a bad temper, and I don't know how much trouble he will cause. Sigh, it's rare for me to have a few days of leisure. Not long after, I have to go to the outer realm to fight with madness again. I really miss the peaceful days now. Fu Liyun sighed. Lin Xiaoyang smiled. Brother Fu, one day we will deal with madness. At that time, we will go back to our own homes, and it will not be easy to meet again. Now, in order to deal with madness, the powerhouses of each plane had gathered here, but without the threat of madness, everyone naturally had to return to their own planes, and it would be extremely difficult to meet again. I hope this kid is really like Brother Zhou said, and he will be one of the main characters in the future to eliminate madness. Fu Liyun's gaze seemed to be able to penetrate all obstacles, looking at Ling Han in the 9 extremes formation. Lin Xiaoyang squeezed his teeth and smiled. He had always been optimistic. Ling Han suddenly shivered, feeling as if he was being stared at by a terrifying existence, but when he looked around, there was only thick fog, and he couldn't see anything. Psychological effect, he shook his head. There must be a celestial venerable in the martial arts courtyard. Perhaps there was a celestial venerable just now. With the strength of a celestial venerable, how could the 9 extremes formation block his gaze? Ling Han strode forward. The clouds and mist in front of him condensed into a leopard, which fiercely launched an attack. Peng, he shattered it with a casual punch. His vitality index is around 5,600. It's indeed enough to give ordinary immortal kings a headache. Ordinary immortal kings were already emperors. If they reached the peak of the 1st heaven, their vitality index would be around 5,600. Now that the formation had evolved, the ones that came out were all such opponents. It was no wonder that the majority of the celestial kings were stumped. After all, there were pitifully few emperors. As Ling Han advanced, the dense fog continued to materialize opponents for him. Sometimes there would only be 1, and sometimes there would be 2 or even 3. This would cause ordinary immortal kings to feel a headache, and they could only choose to flee. However, in front of Ling Han, all he needed was a single punch to resolve all of this. He quickly walked out of the fog and saw a city in front of him. The city was not big, but it was surrounded by walls, and the gates were tightly shut. On both sides of the city were mountain cliffs that towered into the clouds. It was equivalent to a canyon, and this city was the checkpoint that blocked the way forward. If he wanted to continue forward, he had to pass through this city. Ling Han was not surprised that a city or towering mountain cliffs had suddenly appeared here, because this was within the formation. Even if stars or the Earth's core appeared, it would be acceptable. He arrived at the city gates, and saw that the gates were covered with messy symbols. At first glance, it was a mess, but as long as he thought about it carefully, these symbols would immediately appear in his mind. It was as if he did not need to memorize them at all. These symbols flashed randomly, making one's head spin. The city gates were tightly shut, and the messy symbols were everywhere. Obviously, if he wanted to open the gates and enter the city, he would need to put these symbols together into some kind of specific character. This was the next test, but Ling Han wanted to try another method. He took a deep breath, bent his legs slightly, and then suddenly exerted force. Peng, he immediately flew up, attempting to directly jump over this city. Terrifying lightning flashed wildly, directly striking Ling Han down from the sky. So painful. Ling Han clenched his teeth. Even though his physique was astonishing, being struck by lightning like this still caused him great pain. As expected, it would not be so easy to pass. Then what about the gates? He punched again. Peng, the gates did not move at all. Instead, the vibration caused his arm to feel some pain. There was no other way, he could only solve the problem and enter. He retreated a few steps, raising his head to look at the city gates. Even though those symbols had all burrowed into his mind, they could not remain for too long. Right now, he had completely forgotten about them. It was very strange. Sha sha sha, light footsteps sounded. He turned his head, only to see the green-robed celestial king rushing out from the mist. He was originally calm and elegant, but now his clothes were all torn, and there were many wounds on his body. He looked very disheveled. However, when he saw Ling Han, an expression as if he had seen a ghost suddenly appeared on his face. This was really strange. How could this brat appear here, and even faster than him? The green-robed celestial king was stunned, his mouth half open. Even though celestial kings were calm and composed, and would not even blink if the sky collapsed before them, right now, he did not care at all, and wanted to spit out his tongue. This was so strange, he could not understand it at all. It's still Dao Brother Green who is first. With a strange laugh, the big-headed and small-bodied celestial king also appeared. His situation was not much better, his whole body was covered in blood, but his battle intent was blazing. Pooh! He also saw Ling Han, and instantly choked, his expression sluggish. So I'm still third. The Plum Blossom Celestial King appeared, her clothes somewhat torn, revealing some of her skin. Her skin was as white as snow, and as smooth as jade. Ling Han suddenly thought, these Celestial Kings wanted to challenge the formation together every time. Could it be that they wanted the Plum Blossom Celestial King to be like this? Pooh! The Plum Blossom Fairy also choked, and looked at Ling Han in a daze. Then the other two Celestial Kings also walked out, and when they saw Ling Han, their expressions were the same. The 5 great Celestial Kings only had one thought in their minds, and that was that they had seen a ghost. Ling Han waved and said, "Everyone, we meet again." The 5 Celestial Kings only felt that this was too unreal. Even if Ling Han really stood in front of them, they would still be filled with disbelief. So Dao Friend had hidden so deeply. The green-robed Celestial King finally spoke, his voice filled with emotions. He was the first to be shocked, and naturally the first to regain his senses. There was no other possibility. Ling Han definitely had hidden his strength, and his true cultivation had reached the Celestial King level. So we were all fooled. The big-headed Celestial King also said, clearly somewhat dissatisfied. You are clearly in Celestial King, but you purposely pretended to be young. Is it good to fool people like this? Where's Dao Friend ran? The Plum Blossom Fairy looked around. So much time had passed. Why hadn't she seen the black-robed Celestial King appear yet? The 6 of them had already challenged the formation many times, and the difference in strength was actually not that big. Usually, the green-robed Celestial King would be the first to pass, and the black-robed Celestial King would usually be ranked 4th. But now, let alone 4th, even the 5th had been out for a long time. Why hadn't they seen him yet? Could it be? The 5 Celestial Kings simultaneously walked towards Ling Han. Phone reading was much more refreshing. Chapter 25-22. The Black Robe Immortal King did not like Ling Han. Everyone knew this. Now, Ling Han had appeared here, But the Black Robe Immortal King had disappeared. What did this mean? He had been killed. If this was true, then the information revealed by this was too terrifying. Firstly, it was difficult for an immortal king to kill an immortal king. This was publicly acknowledged. As long as the difference in cultivation level was not large, if an immortal king wanted to escape, another immortal king would not be able to stop him. Secondly, it had only been a short time and an immortal king had already died. How powerful was Ling Han to be able to kill the Black Robe Immortal King so easily and in such a short time? He did not even give the Black Robe Immortal King a chance to escape. With such doubts in mind, all of them were filled with fear and anxiety. Ling Han only smiled faintly. He did not explain anything. He looked at the gate in front of him. The rune fragments surged in his consciousness, trying to combine them. The strange thing was, although he tried hard to remember them, as time passed, they all faded away. It had only been 2 hours, but his mind was blank. He could not remember anything. Brother, this stage is to spell the words. You have to spell out these broken runes in a limited time. Then they will appear in the back of your mind. If they are correct, you will be brought into the city, the Plum Blossom Immortal King said. Ling Han cursed in his heart. Who came up with this idea? He nodded at the Plum Blossom Immortal King to show his gratitude. The other immortal kings saw this and snorted in their hearts. They were a little unhappy. Ling Han walked towards the gate again. The Plum Blossom Immortal King and the others did the same. They all started to try to figure out the runes. Each time, the runes were different. So even if they had passed before, it was useless. They had to start all over again. So, it was useless to rely on luck. This time, Ling Han focused. When these broken runes appeared in his mind, he did not immediately start to spell them. Instead, he analyzed them first. Different runes would definitely be slightly different. As expected, he quickly divided these runes into 20 parts. Then, he started to spell the 20 runes at the same time. With the strength of his soul, this was a piece of cake. Very quickly, the 20 runes appeared at the same time. Not bad, you've broken it. You can enter the city now. Don't be too proud. Ling Han read in his heart. Xiao, a beam of light swept past, immediately attracting him to the city gate. Puff, the 5 celestial kings spat out mouthfuls of air once again. They were so shocked that their eyes widened. That was fast. This child's achievements will definitely be limitless. The green-robed Immortal King sighed. Huh. The Plum Blossom Immortal King suddenly paused and said, someone said that Yang Jixien was defeated by a mysterious person who even tore apart his armor with his bare hands, and that person is not even an immortal king. I thought it was just a rumor, but now, it's that brat. The 4 immortal kings said at the same time. Ling Han's figure shook, and he had already appeared in the city. However, this city was empty, and there was not a single person in the surroundings. It was filled with a strange and eerie atmosphere. Fearless, he strode forward. The sound of footsteps came from the front, and 2 figures appeared at the same time. They were about 6 meters tall, and their bodies glowed with a metallic luster. Ling Han hummed in acknowledgement, slightly surprised. These were battle soldiers. The 2 battle soldiers attacked at the same time, and a beam of red light shot out from each of their eyes, sweeping towards Ling Han. Ling Han stretched out his hand to block, and 4 beams of red light landed on his hand. So hot. Ling Han was slightly surprised. This was not the rule of fire, but a kind of violent energy, but it made him feel a burning sensation. It was very inconceivable. No wonder the Xian Ni plane pressured the alien realm so much, even making the alien realm make an exception and create a battle beast like Little Terror. It was because of the power of battle soldiers. These things were not like immortal kings, which could be completely mass-produced, and their numbers were indeed frightening. Explode! Ling Han roared softly. Hong! The sound turned into a wave. Ping, ping, it instantly shattered the 2 battle soldiers. Under the suppression of his 5th heaven battle prowess, these 2 battle soldiers were really not enough. He swept his way and soon left the city, and a large river appeared in front of him. The large river still could not be crossed. There was a mysterious force suppressing it, and if one flew through the air, they would be struck by lightning. In the large river, stones emerged from time to time, but there was no pattern. Ling Han understood that he needed to step on these floating stones to cross the river. The distance I can cross will obviously be limited. Let's try it first. Ling Han jumped on a stone and then jumped with all his strength. Plop, he immediately fell into the river. With a boom, the waves rolled, and he was directly swept downstream. When he rushed over, it was already the time for an incense stick to burn. Obviously, if it was just to pass the test, he did not need to care about how many times he failed, but if he wanted to leave his name on the list and compete with the geniuses of the thousands of planes, he could not fail even once. Ling Han stood still. He observed the changes of these stones, and in his heart, he summarized the pattern. After a day, he finally stepped forward. Shio, 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 he leaped from stone to stone, and in one breath, he came to the other side of the large river. He looked back, and then continued forward. Not long after, a mountain gate appeared in front of him. This was not a new test, but the gate of the world's #1 martial arts academy. He broke through the first layer of the 9 extremes formation. He saw a person rushing out from behind the mountain gate. This was a middle-aged man, his body twined with a strange 3-colored light. He looked at Ling Han and said, "Congratulations, fellow Taoist, for passing the 9 extremes formation. From now on, you are an official student of my academy. May I ask how I should address fellow Taoist?" Ling Han thought for a moment. "Zhang San." The middle-aged man's face stiffened. "Even if you don't want to reveal your true identity, please put in some effort and think of a normal name. This doesn't require much brainpower. Is this really good?" "Zhang, fellow Taoist Zhang San, do you still want to pass the second layer of the 9 extremes formation?" The middle-aged man smiled. "Only by passing the second layer can you leave your name on the immemorial stone." He pointed to the 8 stone tablets that were lined up in a row at the side. The tablets were densely covered with names. Ling Han looked at the first stone tablet. This was the list of the 100 fastest people in history to pass the second layer of the 9 extremes formation. The first one that jumped into his eyes was Lin Xiaoyang. Lord Lin Xiaoyang is Emperor Lin Luo's eldest son. The middle-aged man was full of admiration. Sir Lin Xiaoyang's talent in martial art isn't world-shaking, but it is the type of great wisdom that appears to be slow-witted, a late bloomer. Step by step, he has advanced steadily and is now a 6th-step Emperor. Ling Han's heart stirred. Lin Luo was Zhou Heng's master, a 7th-step celestial venerable. This sect was too amazing. Not only was the master a 7th-step Emperor, but even his son and disciple were 6th-step. It really made people jealous and envious. After him, the second place was Han Yeyun, followed by Lu Ziyu. The middle-aged man continued. Lord Han Yeyun, Lord Lu Ziyu, Lord An Fi, and Lord Long Yenyun are all geniuses from several epochs ago. They've long since become celestials. Guang He was number 6, and Ah Mu was number 7. Ling Han's pupils constricted. He had heard of this person's name before. He was extremely monstrous. Happy Lantern Festival to everyone. Chapter 25-24. Ling Han sat on the ground and wholeheartedly tried to figure out the great Tao symbols in his mind. He was not in a hurry to challenge the formation. The opportunity to figure out these great Tao symbols was rare, and he could challenge the formation anytime. After staying here for at least 3 days, Ling Han stood up with satisfaction. He had gained a lot this time. These symbols were probably formed by a celestial venerable using a supreme method to condense the great Tao. To a third heaven celestial king like him, they were extremely meaningful and benefited him greatly. It was no wonder that some prodigies did not leave their names on the immemorial stone. It was because they were distracted and spent a lot of time on it. The gap between prodigies was already very small, so how could 3 days be different? Although no one explicitly said it, Ling Han had a feeling that this was his only chance to figure out these symbols. Things like opportunities could only be encountered and not sought. Ling Han pondered for a moment. Was he going to attempt it again? Deliberately chasing after rankings was not something he liked, but in order to suppress his natural arrogance, he did not mind doing it again. He took large strides forward. There were soldiers in the city blocking him, but of course, those at the second heaven could not affect him at all. Ling Han easily killed his way to the side of the river. Similarly, there were floating stones that flashed and disappeared at an astonishing speed. These changes were even more irregular, and it gave Ling Han a headache. He spent a whole day to figure out the pattern of the changes. Then he leaped out. Shio shio shio. This was fast. In just a few dozen leaps, he arrived at the other side of the river. At this point, he had almost passed the 9 extremes formation. As expected, after walking for a while, a stone tablet appeared in front of him. He actually left the original place. Congratulations, fellow Ling, for successfully passing the second level. Ouyang Ming was still waiting for him at the same place. When he saw Ling Han, a smile appeared on his face. Although Ling Han's result did not meet the requirements of the list, it was already very impressive that he could pass the second level. At least he deserved to be polite. Come, I'll take you to your place, he said. Ling Han waved his hand and said, I want to try again. Ouyang Ming furrowed his eyebrows and thought, what's there to be anxious about? Besides, you've just passed the test once, so how much can you improve by continuously challenging it? It took you more than 4 days to finish the test, so you're far from the requirement to be on the list. Most people would only challenge the formation after many years when they were at their peak condition. Yet, not only would your results not improve, it would only decrease. However, since Ling Han insisted on giving it a try, it was meaningless for him to stop him. All right, I'll wait for you, he said. Ling Han smiled, and once again entered the second stage. There was nothing much to say in front. His strength was overwhelming, and all he had to do was advance bravely. When he reached the city gate, he unleashed his full strength. If he wanted to win against Tianxing, it was impossible for him to surpass him in terms of combat. The only thing he could do was to be more perceptive and analytical. Ling Han was very confident in these abilities. Very quickly, he spelled over 40 words. This time, he used real words instead of path symbols. Once he was brought into the city, he immediately exerted his strength. His fists were invincible, and he crushed his way to the side of the river. Although it was still the second stage, the pattern of the floating stones' appearance had completely changed. It took Ling Han another day's worth of effort before he finally understood the intricacies of the floating stones. He immediately leaped into the air. Shio, shio, shio. In a few steps, he had arrived at the opposite bank and strode out. When he went out, Tianxing happened to walk out from behind the 4th stone tablet. He furrowed his eyebrows and seemed displeased. He knew very well that he did not make any breakthroughs, so he was naturally dissatisfied. Fellow. Ouyang Ming walked over and spoke with a trembling voice. Ling Han went over to him and wondered why he was so surprised. Congratulations, fellow, you're on the list. Ouyang Ming finally managed to complete his sentence. He really could not imagine that Ling Han's result could make such a terrifying leap. Previously, it took him more than 4 days, but this time, he was on the list directly. Ling Han nodded. He knew he would definitely make it, but the key was his rank. Rank? He asked. 8th, Ouyang Ming answered. The result was too terrifying. Among the geniuses in the academy, Ling Han was second only to Mu. He had pushed Du Shi, Tianxing, Fire Hibiscus, and other peerless geniuses to the back. Ling Han was surprised. It was not his best performance this time, but he was still slightly disappointed that he could only rank 8th. He thought that it would not be difficult for him to make it to the top 5, but the gap was still quite big. After some thought, he felt at ease. The immortal realm was only a low-class plane, and his evolution index was only 11. Perhaps it was a little higher, but it was definitely not as high as 12. Therefore, it was not strange that he was not as good as some freaks. On the contrary, this made Ouyang Ming want to fight intensely. He decided to compare himself with those freaks in the 3rd stage after he recovered his cultivation base. This was because the result was obtained by crushing his boundary, so it could not truly reflect his standard. Let's just go for the 5th stage. Mu, Tianxing, and the others were ranked around 20. Tianxing had already turned to leave, but he suddenly turned around when he heard Yangming's words. Wouldn't that mean that he was being suppressed? Yangming glanced at the second stone tablet, and sure enough, his name had fallen from 9th to 10th. Tianxing was instantly displeased. This was because he hated being stepped on by others, so he challenged the formation again and again to surpass everyone who was above him. Now that he was being suppressed by a newcomer, he was extremely displeased. Nevertheless, he quickly scoffed and walked forward again. This was only the second formation. Many people had actually suppressed their cultivation levels to challenge it. Although their battle prowess was weakened, their souls would not be affected. Thus, they would have a great advantage in the runes and the floating stone calculation round. Ling Han's boundary was not obvious, so he was obviously hiding it on purpose. Perhaps he was a 9th heaven immortal king. Therefore, there was no need for Yangming to care. In the martial arts academy, only Mu, Du Shi, and a few other geniuses could be taken seriously by Yangming. Their evolution indexes had reached 12, or even higher. Yangming disdained to pay attention to these little pawns who did not even dare to show their faces. As for Ling Han, he looked at Tianxing's back. Before long he would defeat this person fair and square, not just in this way. Brother Zhang, you're really extraordinary. Yangming was full of praise. To be able to leave one's name on the stone tablet, whether one was an advanced immortal king or not, was enough to prove one's great talent. It was not as simple as befriending such a person, but currying favor with him. Yangming welcomed Ling Han into the mountain gate. It was a range of endless mountains, like a world of its own. Even with Ling Han's eyesight, he could not see the end of it. Under Yangming's arrangements, he obtained a cave residence. The spiritual qi here was rich, and it was a holy land for cultivation. After Ling Han sent Yangming away, he took out the furnace that he had obtained previously. He wanted to see if it could be used to refine pills. Chapter 25-25. This furnace's greatest characteristic was its sturdiness. However, a good furnace not only needed to be sturdy, it also needed to be resistant to fire. Especially when refining immortal king-grade pills, one would need to use the great Tao of fire as the furnace's fire. Even immortal gold could be slowly melted. The sturdiness of immortal gold didn't mean that it couldn't be destroyed, it just couldn't be completely destroyed. Ling Han's attainments in the great Tao of fire weren't deep, but because he had refined immortal gold before, he still grasped a bit of it. He immediately used the great Tao of fire to burn this furnace. What surprised him was that although the furnace quickly turned red, it didn't show any signs of softening. Its fire resistance was very high. Ling Han thought about it carefully. This should be because some kind of strange earth was added into the furnace's material. The fire resistance of earth was much higher than that of metal. Thus, by mixing earth and metal, the furnace refined would have an extremely good fire resistance. Of course, ordinary earth wouldn't work, and ordinary metal wouldn't work either. In my opinion, this metal should be the impurities of immortal gold, so it doesn't have the sharpness of immortal gold, but its sturdiness is almost comparable. The difference is that immortal gold has the ability to recover itself. It's really hard, but once it's broken, it'll really be broken. Even if it's mended, there will still be a gap. Unlike immortal gold, it's a whole body, as if it has life, it can heal itself. However, to me, this is indeed an extremely good thing. I finally have a good pill furnace. Ling Han was very satisfied. What he was going to refine now was definitely an immortal king-grade pill, so the requirements for the furnace were very high. Otherwise, what would he do if the furnace melted on its own in the middle of refining the pill? Previously, refining immortal king-grade pills gave him a headache. He put the pill furnace aside and started to cultivate in seclusion, keeping a low profile. Although there were countless people outside who wanted to see him, to be able to enter the immemorial stone, no matter what the reason was, it only proved one thing, and that was that Ling Han's talent was extremely high. This kind of person was definitely worth befriending. Ling Han was not interested in making friends. His focus now was to improve his cultivation. Even if he did not break through to the 4th celestial layer, he had to return to the 3rd celestial layer. He stimulated his physique with all his might. Under the acceleration of the flow of time, he drew upon the laws of time of this world and added them to his body, speeding up his cultivation. This was an extremely high-level plane. Not only were there many laws here, but they were also very powerful. In a battle between first firmament immortal kings, Ling Han could guarantee that even emperors could be defeated by ordinary immortal kings here. Therefore, not only was Ling Han in the process of recultivating, but he also had to deepen his control over the rules. As the days passed, his cultivation level continued to rise. Every year, the martial institution would distribute an astonishing amount of cultivation resources. This was the only super high-grade plane in the entire Yuan world. The cultivation resources here were astonishingly rich. Now that they were all concentrated together, it was completely enough to support the crazy advancement of these geniuses. Ling Han naturally didn't use these resources. He was still quite far away from the immortal king realm, so there was no hurry. In any case, he wouldn't waste them. 10 years, 100 years, 1,000 years. Suddenly, 7,000 years passed. For immortal kings, 7,000 years might not be a matter of a blink of an eye, but in their long life, it was really a short moment. The number one martial institution in the world didn't have any major incidents. Although there were 1 or 2 newcomers who passed the 9 extremes array and became disciples of the martial institution, they were far from being as monstrous as Ling Han. Naturally, they couldn't cause any waves. As for Ling Han, he was too low-key. He didn't show himself for 7,000 years. Even if he had caused a huge sensation previously, he was now somewhat lost in the crowd. Some people guessed that he used some special means and even overdraft his life to create such results. Therefore, he had been recuperating all these years. Otherwise, why didn't he come out to meet people with such a glorious event? If Ling Han went out now and revealed his identity, it would definitely cause a commotion. However, if he didn't announce his origin, probably only a few people would recognize him. At this time, Ling Han finally ended his seclusion. Third firmament immortal king realm, he finally returned to the realm he should be in, and he was much stronger. However, I have become stronger, and others have also become stronger. I don't have any advantage. On the contrary, the power of rules has become stronger, but my body technique hasn't improved. In fact, my advantage has weakened. Ling Han muttered to himself. However, he wasn't the slightest bit disappointed because he was full of confidence and his battle intent was even more intense. Competition was a good thing. Heaven's prides from countless planes have gathered here. Some people might be very low-key. Therefore, the true experts are far from those on the ancient stone. I really want to have a battle immediately. Ling Han stood up. He had already rested for long enough. It was time to go out and take a stroll. He first had a good reunion with the women in the spatial immortal tool. He put away the cultivation resources he had accumulated over the years and walked out of the door. He casually strolled in the mountains. When he arrived at the waist of the mountain, he saw there was an academy here. He walked in leisurely. There weren't any ancient books here, only pieces of jade talismans. As long as he touched them with his divine sense, a bridge would be built and the information in the jade talisman would be transmitted over. It was convenient and fast. Moreover, these jade talismans could also be used as a vessel. At the same time, they could accept many people's divine senses, allowing everyone to communicate and discuss. It was very magical. It was said that this was based on the technology of a certain plane and then modified. This academy was very big, and there were countless jade talismans. There was even a special room with only one jade talisman inside. Many people surrounded it. This was because there were more people discussing, so a room was specially opened. Ling Han first came to the first jade talisman after entering the academy. This was the largest, but what was hidden inside was not any technique. Instead, it was the guidance of all the jade talismans here. It was like a catalog. He scanned it. There was really nothing it couldn't contain. There was astronomy, geography, history, alchemy, smithing, and of course, there were even more martial art techniques. Many techniques in the celestial realm would definitely be supreme. Even the forces of the 9 heavens would fight over them. But here, they could be flipped over by anyone. Of course, this was only limited to the students of the Martial Arts Academy. The number 1 in the world was indeed domineering. The secret techniques of the Celestial King level were simply for reference. Ling Han's heart moved. Now, only the Rage Fist was created by him. As for the others, they were all learned from others. This was too little. If he wanted to become a Celestial Lord, he had to walk a path with his own characteristics. He should first raise the level of the Rage Fist. Ling Han thought. This was a fist technique he created when he was in the Dividing Soul realm. But now that he was already a Celestial King, he naturally needed to improve it. But how could he improve it just because he wanted to? He went to the fist technique area. There were countless fist technique secret techniques here. He poured his divine sense in and greedily absorbed them, but he didn't cultivate them. He only used them as reference. He wanted to learn from the strengths of hundreds of schools and then integrate them with his own understanding. Now he was just absorbing. Brother Ding, are you going to the blind date? Chapter 25-26. Blind date. Ha, you're talking about the wine party hosted by Xian Ying. When did it become a blind date? Heh, I heard from the people in the academy that this wine party is supposed to be about martial art, but it's actually a blind date. A big shot in the academy thinks that everyone shouldn't just focus on cultivation, but should also find a partner. That's true. All of us are too outstanding. Previously, we have been wholeheartedly cultivating and simply don't have the time to care about love affairs. Now, we don't even care about ordinary women. I'm afraid that only the Empress here is worthy of us. Brother Ding, let me tell you, even Goddess Luanxing will be there. What? Goddess Luanxing will be there too? Of course, because of her, a few extraordinary beings will also be there, such as Gu He, Xiao Yingxiong and Miao Hua. Hiss, these monsters. The conversation between the two of them continued to travel over, and was captured by Ling Han. It couldn't be helped. The Jade Talisman was a container, and whoever sent out their divine sense would be captured by others who touched the Jade Talisman. This was originally for everyone to exchange their experiences, not for idle chatter. Ling Han's heart stirred. The Empress was going to participate in the blind date. He didn't believe that the Empress would do that. Even if he really died, the Empress's pride wouldn't bother to go. She was the type that made men kneel on the ground and look up to her while she slowly picked. The Empress was probably kept in the dark, and attending this wine party was mainly to discuss martial art. Then he had to go, or else what if his wife was kidnapped? The two were still talking about the wine party, and then they conveniently talked about the beauties of the academy. Because the academy had existed for several eras, even if the number of female prodigies was a little less, there were still many after so many years, and there were bound to be outstanding beauties among them. Among them, a very small number broke through to Celestial Venerable, but most stopped at the 9th heaven of Celestial King. Some of them were still cultivating in the academy, and some were adventuring everywhere, looking for opportunities to break through to the level they dreamed of. The academy also had a beauty ranking, which listed the most beautiful women since ancient times. There were even sub-rankings divided by time period, spanning 10 billion years. In fact, it was the same for the male prodigies. Only a small number of them became heavenly venerables, while the majority of them lingered around the 9th level of heaven. There was also a ranking for men, but of course, it wasn't based on appearance but strength. For example, on the recent strength rankings, the number 1 was not Tianxing, but Gu He, Xiao Yingxiong and the others. They were already at the 6th heaven. In order to be accepted as a student of the martial institution, one had to be at least an Emperor Realm expert. Those who could be ranked near the top were even more likely to be Emperor stars. They might even be monstrous geniuses whose evolution index had reached 11 or 12. Gu He, Xiao Yingxiong, Miao Hua, and the others were such freaks that they had no choice but to submit to them. Of course, this was because of the suppression of their cultivation realms, and when it came to fighting at the same level, he was definitely naturally stronger, otherwise he would not be ranked so high on the ancient stone. One must know that Xiao Yingxiong and the others were not ranked. It was also possible that they disdained such a ranking. Ling Han understood a bit. In short, he was under a lot of pressure right now. The number of people who had ideas about his wife was less than 8,000. Moreover, they were all super geniuses of the martial courtyard. All right, go and protect your wife, Ling Han said in his mind as he continued to comprehend the essence of various fist techniques. After a day, he finally left the academy and returned to his residence, starting to fuse these fist techniques. Though his deduction ability could not compare to Wally's, it was definitely top-notch. Under the acceleration of the flow of time, innumerable comprehensions were born. However, 2 days later in real time, he had no choice but to stop. The banquet was about to begin. He changed his clothes to make himself look more impressive, but naturally would not reveal his original appearance. He believed that the Empress, Hunyo, and the others would still be able to recognize him, even if it was 1,000,000 years. He looked at himself in the mirror, and felt that he was handsome enough. Thus, he pushed open the door and left. Previously, when the two of them were conversing, Ling Han also knew where the banquet would be held. Thus, after he left the door, he directly headed there. The banquet was hosted by a person called Xian Ying. He was a veteran prodigy, and according to the ranking here, with 10 billion years as a division, he would be someone from the previous 2 generations, having long since reached the 9th heaven of the Celestial King tier. There were not many students who reached the 9th heaven and still hadn't left, because most would follow the Celestial Venerables to the outer realms to fight against the chaos. Though they were just there to watch, and it was extremely dangerous, the possibility of obtaining sudden enlightenment was higher in that kind of life and death situation. It could be said that most Celestial Venerables broke through in the Outer Realms battlefield. Xian Ying had actually gone to the Outer Realms battlefield before, and now he was back on vacation. At the same time, he listened to a certain important figure of the martial courtyard and held a banquet to get to know his younger brothers and sisters, and popularized to them the cruelty of the Outer Realms battlefield. His abode was halfway up a mountain. Although it was within the martial courtyard, the distance was really far. Even if Ling Han sprinted at full speed, it would probably take about 2 hours to arrive. Ting, 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 a sound came from behind. Ling Han was surprised. Though he didn't sprint at full speed, his speed was already ridiculously fast, and he was actually caught up. He turned back, only to see a carriage rapidly approaching, and the mount was actually a dragon. Dragons, the leader of the celestial beasts, were an incredibly powerful creature, and it was said that they could become celestial kings at birth. Just this point alone, which race in the world could compare? Thus, dragons were also incomparably proud existences. Ling Han didn't see any celestial rank dragons in the celestial realm, because the ancestral dragon had been refined into a precious tool by the celestial venerable Feng Qing, and the other dragons had basically died in battle while resisting the invasion of the other realms. For the same reason, the phoenix race was the same, and the ancestral phoenix had also died at the hands of the celestial venerable Feng Qing. This was the first time he had seen a celestial king tier dragon, but it actually played the role of a mount, which made Ling Han a little surprised. Xiao, the dragon sword passed, and the carriage also brushed past. He saw that the carriage was covered densely with runes, and it was clearly not an ordinary item, or else how could it withstand such speed, and it would have long fallen apart. Idiot, come and chase me. A head poked out from the carriage window, provoking Ling Han. At first, if he had surpassed him, then so be it. Ling Han did not take it to heart, thither. He was only rueful that this was the first time he had seen a celestial king tier great dragon, yet he had not thought that he would be mocked even as he walked. That person was a very young man, and he laughed heartily before sitting back in the carriage. The interior of the carriage was very luxurious, and it was covered with thick carpets. Apart from him, there was also a purple-robed young man tasting wine. When he saw Zhuo Kai retract his head, the person twirled the leg of his wine cup and said leisurely, "Young Master Zhuo, is this really okay? What's wrong with it? He's a mere third firmament celestial king, and he doesn't even have a means of transportation. What kind of person can he be?" The man said. His name was Zhuo Kai, and he also had an illustrious identity. His great-grandfather was a quasi-celestial venerable. Although he had the word Quasi-dash, in that he hadn't truly stepped into that invincible realm. As long as he was even a little bit close to a celestial venerable, wasn't that awesome enough? Therefore, Zhuokai was naturally arrogant. The purple-robed young man was just about to speak, but he suddenly spat out all the wine in his mouth with a pft. Chapter 25-28. Your master is very busy, so you'd better take me to the place first. Ling Han laughed and got into the carriage. Although the dragon hadn't transformed into a human form, its intelligence wasn't low. It naturally knew that Ling Han's strength was beyond its imagination. It didn't dare to resist. After letting out a dragon roar, its 4 claws rose into the air and immediately moved as fast as lightning. Ling Han opened the window and looked at the constantly changing scenery around him. He nodded to himself. Dragons were indeed creatures born to fly. Their speed was really amazing. However, Ling Han looked carefully at a few pieces of special metal on the dragon's body. They were glowing and flashing with runes. He immediately understood that the dragon's speed was fast, but it wasn't fast to the point where he was astonished. Instead, it was because of the few pieces of metal, which were definitely treasured weapons that increased the dragon's speed. That was why it was so fast. This was enough to keep up with Ling Han's full speed. After more than an hour, Shen Ying's abode was already in sight. It wasn't a problem that Ling Han hadn't been here before, because there were too many carriages parked outside the cave abode. The horses pulling the carriages were all different, but they were all at the Celestial King level. There were peacocks, green phoenixes, giants, and, of course, pure humans. As long as one had strength, even ants could be high and mighty. And if one encountered a stronger existence, even a human celestial king would be reduced to a mount. So, it wasn't strange that a celestial king dragon was a mount. The dragon stopped and restrained its aura. Although it was a dragon, and at the celestial king level, it didn't have any sense of superiority here. If it dared to be arrogant, anyone could slay it. It carefully lay on the ground. After being a slave for so long, it had forgotten the pride of a celestial king. Hey, isn't this Zhuokai's dragon carriage? Hee, that prodigal is here too. With his personality, he'll definitely offend a few female celestial kings today. At most, he'll be beaten up. After all, there's a quasi-celestial master ancestor. Everyone has to give him face. Lord Zhuobing is a top genius of our academy. He's fought in the foreign battlefields for countless years and finally entered the ranks of quasi-celestial masters. He's only half a step away from true transcendence. This lord is such a hero. How could he have such an unworthy descendant? Haha, if every generation produces a dragon, then wouldn't the fiery frost plane belong to the Zhuo family? Many people recognized Zhuokai's dragon chariot. It was obvious that this guy was not a common show-off in the martial courtyard. Even before seeing him, he had already attracted the heated discussion of everyone. Of course, all of them were negative. 2 young men came out to welcome them. They were Zhuokai's gang of scoundrels. They both had quasi-Empyrean ancestors in their families. One was called Wu Ju, and the other was called Shushan. Kaizi, why are you so late? Come out, beauty. The 2 of them shouted from below the carriage. Ling Han opened the door and came out, causing the 2 of them to gasp in surprise. Because they couldn't find Zhuokai, they couldn't help but ask, "Where's Zhuokai?" They were not surprised that there was someone else sitting in Zhuokai's car, because Zhuokai loved to put on a show. He often made friends with geniuses so that he could brag about it everywhere in the future. But what about the Zhuokai? Ling Han smiled and said, "Zhuokai encountered something fun on the way and asked me to inform you. Hurry up and go have fun." Wu Ju and Shushan were both surprised. They knew that Zhuokai was fun, but the level of this banquet was so high that all the geniuses in the past 10 billion years had been invited. Zhuokai had actually found an even more fun place. What's so fun? Wu Ju couldn't help but ask. Although he was also an immortal king, he had been forcefully pulled up by an almighty being. There was basically no room for improvement in the future. Hence, eating, drinking, and having fun was his current mission. Ling Han pretended to be mysterious and made a shushing gesture. He then put his hand to his mouth and whispered, "It's very fun." That's why Zhuo Kai invited you over. Seeing that Ling Han was being so mysterious, Wu Ju and Shushan couldn't help but ask, "Where is it?" Ling Han told them the location in detail, causing the dragon at the side to grimace. Ling Han was obviously trying to stir up trouble. If others were to see Zhuo Kai's appearance, would he still have the face to see others in the future? Sinister. He was truly sinister. However, the dragon didn't dare make a sound. It pretended not to know anything. After being punched by Ling Han, it was already completely afraid. Wu Ju and Shushan were stirred. They knew Zhuo Kai's character very well. If it wasn't for the fact that the matter was extremely fun, how could he have given up on such a bustling scene and gone somewhere else to have fun? They immediately summoned a carriage and sped off according to Ling Han's directions. They were afraid that Zhuo Kai would finish all the fun by himself. Ling Han chuckled as he jumped off the carriage and walked towards the cave abode. He was only a third firmament immortal king. Such a realm wasn't high, and he had never shown his face. Naturally, no one knew how powerful and monstrous he was. No one paid him any attention. After entering the cave abode, it was a completely different world. For celestial kings, opening up a world was really too easy. Thus, this cave abode was astonishingly large. The place they entered was a massive plaza, and there were rows of tables in the plaza. Every row of tables was made up of hundreds of tables, and they were covered with white cloth. One row was filled with meat, while the other row was filled with fruits. There were many people walking back and forth between the tables, taking something from one side to another. Coincidentally, they could take meat and fruits from anywhere, which was very convenient. Everyone walked around and ate as they conversed with others. Then, there would be attendants coming back to pour wine for everyone. It was quite a unique atmosphere. Though there were already several hundred people here, Ling Han only needed a glance to confirm that the Empress, Hunyou, and bewitching Maiden Ro weren't among them. Thus, he picked up a plate and began to walk around. Very soon, he picked up a pile of food and then walked to the side to eat. There was no place to sit in the middle of the plaza, but there were all around, and there were tables to put things on. However, there weren't many people here, because this was a wine party and was for everyone to interact. What was the meaning of sitting at the side and just eating? Ling Han naturally wouldn't mind. The food here was really not bad. Some of the dried meat of Celestial King tier great beasts was already delicious enough when cooked, and if the chef's skills were a little better, it would be even more delicious. He was very engrossed in eating, completely unconcerned about the gazes of others. However, he still attracted the attention of others after wolfing down the food for half a day. A young girl walked over with her hands behind her back, and then suddenly leaned over, her face almost right in front of Ling Han's. Why are you eating here alone? I like it, Ling Han said casually. The taste of this dish was really not bad, and Hunyou would like it. The young girl pursed her lips. Glutton, she said disdainfully. Then she became excited again and said, why don't you go and interact with others? Ling Han asked in response. The young girl was surprised. Could it be that you don't know that this is a blind date exchange? Ling Han couldn't help but smile. Then why don't you participate? Sigh, there aren't any good things. She sighed, looking very regretful. Chapter 25-29. Ling Han broke into a smile, pointed at himself, and asked, how about you and me? The young girl sized him up, then nodded and evaluated. You've cultivated for less than 1 billion years, yet you're already a third heaven celestial king. Not bad, not bad. However, you're not my cup of tea. She spread her hands, an expression that said she didn't like him at all. Ling Han naturally would not be shocked. Though only 1 million or so years had passed in the real world, if he were to take into account the acceleration of the flow of time, that would still be a few 100 million years. This young girl's judgment was quite accurate. He smiled faintly and continued to eat. The young girl became interested in him and said, you're quite interesting. You didn't get angry when I said that. Just because of your magnanimity, I've decided to do a good deed. What? You want to save a single youth like me? Ling Han asked with a smile. I've decided to introduce my elder sister to you. Ling Han couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. This young girl was obviously the unreliable type, and being her elder sister would definitely be very stressful. What are you frowning for? My elder sister is very beautiful, the young girl said proudly. In this year's 100-flower chart, my elder sister is ranked 4th. There would always be bored people who ranked beauties according to their beauty. There was a general ranking, and as long as they were female students of the academy, they would be included. However, there were also sub-rankings below the general ranking, and they were divided by 10 billion years. The young girl was obviously talking about the sub-rankings. With the Empress and Hunyo here, her elder sister could still be ranked 4th, so just thinking about it, she should be very beautiful. Since she's so beautiful, what need is there for you to be anxious? Ling Han said with a smile. You don't understand, the young girl said eloquently. In order to pursue elder sister, those damn men will definitely show their best side, and even if they want to pretend, they have to pretend very well. I won't be at ease, so I want to personally choose for elder sister. You, in front of me, you don't have any pretense, do you? Ling Han couldn't help but laugh. Though this young girl's words were all twisted logic was still logic. Big sister will also come later. I'll introduce you to her, and I guarantee that you'll drool when you see her, the girl boasted. Ling Han deliberately said, Really? I have very high standards. Unless she's as beautiful as Luan Xing, I won't be tempted. The young girl pointed at Ling Han. How could this fellow be so shameless? Who was Luan Xing? Not only was she this year's 100-flower chart's courtesan queen, even if she was placed in the overall rankings, she would be one of the best. The only one who could compete with her was Lin Yulian. However, Lin Yulian had gone out to train a few eras ago and had yet to return. Thus, her status as the #1 beauty of the chaotic stars galaxy was unshakable. You call this having high standards? You're just shameless. Me? You've never even seen Luan Xing, and you're just following the crowd. You can only imagine her peerless beauty in your mind. Let me tell you, if I don't tell you who my sister is, you'll definitely think she's even more beautiful than Luan Xing, said the girl unwillingly. Lu Ziyu, don't randomly play matchmaker for others. A voice suddenly rang out, interrupting the two of them. Ling Han walked over. It was a tall young man with 4 different colors wrapped around his body. There was an indescribable arrogance on his face. Mind your own business? Mind your own business. The young girl snorted and crossed her arms. The young man revealed an expression of displeasure. I'm Guangdong Yu. Don't be so calculative. It doesn't matter if it's 1 more horizontal or 1 less vertical. The young girl shrugged. Her name was Lu Ziyu. Guangdong Yu snorted. Fairy Qiuyun isn't even your sister. Why do you need to worry about her? Mind my business? You really care too much. What does it have to do with you? Chen Ziyu glared at him angrily. Stupid girl, do you think you can do whatever you want just because Fairy Qiuyun dotes on you? Guangdong Yu suddenly reached out to grab Chen Ziyu. Ling Han shook his head. You're a man, and you have an advantage in cultivation. How can you bully a girl? He reached out and grabbed Guangdong Yu's wrist. Chen Ziyu was only a 2nd firmament immortal king. There was no way she could block Guangdong Yu's attack. Guangdong Yu couldn't help but be alarmed. A mere 3rd firmament immortal king was actually able to block his attack. He snorted. How dare you meddle in other people's business? He roared and exerted force in his right hand. The light of laws flashed. He wanted to shatter Ling Han's hand. But his expression immediately changed. His hand didn't move at all. It was still firmly held by Ling Han. He couldn't pull his hand out of the grasp of a 3rd firmament immortal king? This was ridiculous. Could it be that the other party was hiding his cultivation? Impossible. Immortal kings could indeed hide their colors, but they had to either hide all of them or not at all. It was impossible to hide just a few of them. Since Ling Han had displayed 3 brilliant lights, that meant that he was a 3rd heaven celestial king. He was a genuine 3rd heaven celestial king. Guangdong Yu's expression suddenly changed. There was only one possibility. Ling Han was the Emperor Star, or even more monstrous than the Emperor Star. He was a monster with an evolution index of 11 or even 12. I admit defeat, Guan Dongyu said sensibly. If they really fought, not only would he not gain anything, but he would also embarrass himself in public. Ling Han nodded. Since Guan Dongyu was so sensible, he withdrew his hand. Guan Dongyu immediately turned and left. He didn't even participate in the banquet. Wow, so you're this fierce? Chen Ziyu's eyes lit up. Ling Han smiled and asked, "Are you tempted?" "I already said you're not my type," said Chen Ziyu. Chen Ziyu said, "However, I like people like you more. Your chances have increased greatly." Ling Han was just about to speak when he saw a woman swaying her slender waist walk over. She looked very charming, and there were 2 colors wrapped around her body. She bowed slightly to Ling Han and said, "Tan Shuang greets senior brother." Ling Han nodded, which could be considered as returning the greeting. "Shoo shoo shoo, you don't have a share in this person." Chen Ziyu hurriedly chased her away. Clearly, she had only run over after seeing Guan Dongyu being chased away. A 3rd layer deva had forced out a 4th layer deva. That meant he had unparalleled talent. Wouldn't such a person be an excellent son-in-law? Senior brother. Senior brother. Senior brother. Even more women walked over. They were like sharks that had smelled blood. How could Chen Ziyu block all of them by herself? She couldn't help but shout angrily. How could they ignore Ling Han before? At that moment, a commotion rang out. "Fairy Chuyun is here." Someone cried out. "My sister is here." Chen Ziyu immediately felt relieved. She was completely confident that as long as Ling Han arrived, he would definitely be charmed by Yan Chuyun. She wouldn't have to worry about him being seduced by some seductress. The crowd surged, and many people went to the entrance to welcome her. Which man wouldn't be moved by the 4th-ranked beauty on the 100-flower chart? This was a matchmaking event, and the people who came were naturally here for the matchmaking event. Like the stars surrounding the moon, a beautiful woman walked out from the crowd. Behind her were many men, all of them fawning over her. "Let's go. I'll bring you to see my sister," said Chen Ziyu. Chapter 25-30. Yan Qiuyun was like the moon surrounded by stars. She was indeed extraordinarily beautiful, even more beautiful than bewitching Maiden Ro. Her figure was as graceful as a green lotus, beautiful beyond compare. If she only had looks, then she would just be a flower vase. However, she was also a martial art genius. Her aura was powerful, and there were even 5 rays of light entwined around her body. This was enough to prove her strength. Chen Ziyu pulled on one of Ling Han's arms and pulled him forward with all her strength. Wanting to squeeze into the crowd was extremely difficult. Everyone was a celestial king, and they emitted powerful auras. As long as there was a great difference in cultivation level, it was impossible to barge in. Fortunately, Chen Ziyu was still shouting as she walked, attracting Yan Qiuyun's attention. She purposely stopped, and only then did everyone realize, opening up a path for Chen Ziyu. "Sister, I found you a Mr. Right." Chen Ziyu was slightly out of breath. Barging through this crowd was like fighting with many celestial kings, and it made her very tired. When these words were spoken, a great many people immediately glared at her and Ling Han angrily. Yan Qiuyun glanced at Ling Han and said, "Oh, it's him." Her expression was carefree, and she was full of smiles. Chen Ziyu turned her head and almost went mad with anger. That was because although one of Ling Han's hands was being held by her, his other hand was still holding onto a plate, which he placed to his mouth, and was still eating mouthful by mouthful. "How long has it been since you last ate, or are you the reincarnation of a hungry ghost?" Chen Ziyu wanted to cry. She had already put in so much effort, but why did Ling Han, the person involved, not take it to heart at all? "How should I address you, Dao friend?" Yan Qiuyun asked with a smile. She naturally could not match up to a 3rd heaven celestial king, but she thought that Ling Han and Chen Ziyu could become a couple, so she naturally had to show some concern. Ling Han cracked a smile and said, "This one is Li Si." Yan Qiuyun's self-restraint was very good, but when she heard this, she had the urge to beat someone up. "Even if you are not willing to tell me your name, There is no need to trick me like this, right? Oh, so it's fellow Taoist Li Si. She nodded, then said to Chen Ziyu, Ziyu, come, I want to say a few words to you. His words were fake, but in truth, he just didn't want Chen Ziyu and Ling Han to have any contact with each other anymore. He wanted to separate them. Chen Ziyu let go of Ling Han's hand and walked over. Yen Qiuyun smiled faintly and started walking. Then she turned around and glanced at Ling Han. Her gaze was a little fierce and filled with warning. Naturally, she was telling Ling Han not to have any improper thoughts towards Chen Ziyu, or else she would not be polite. Ling Han naturally didn't take it to heart. He just smiled and was about to start walking when he was stopped by a few men with unfriendly expressions. Do not have any thoughts about immortal King Autumn Cloud. You don't deserve it. Otherwise, we don't mind teaching you how to behave. These people spoke one after another, and their words were extremely harsh. Ling Han looked at them. They were all third firmament immortal kings. He shook his head. There are so many people chasing after her, why is she targeting me? This proves that you are too weak. You only dare to shout at me. Those few immortal kings all laughed coldly. Nonsense, they were only third firmament immortal kings. Did they want them to face a fourth firmament immortal king? You're right. They all nodded. Ling Han murmured, am I so easy to bully? He suddenly attacked. Pung pung pung, with just 3 punches and 2 kicks, the few immortal kings were all knocked to the ground. It was clearly a battle between immortal kings, but it became a battle between ruffians. There was no power of laws at all, and every punch landed on flesh. It was extremely vulgar. But the battle ended so quickly. Yen Qiuyun and the others hadn't gone far when they heard the commotion. They all turned around and saw a few immortal kings moaning on the ground. Ling Han dusted his hands and walked back to the side of the square to start eating again. This brat. A blue-robed youth muttered. His eyes twitched. 5 rays of light wrapped around his body, and his aura was extremely terrifying. He's very extraordinary. He defeated celestial kings of the same cultivation level in just a few breaths' time. Moreover, he defeated more than one celestial king. He must have just advanced to become a new emperor star, another celestial king said with a smile. He was dressed in a green robe, and although his evaluation of Ling Han was very high, his expression was extremely calm. This was natural. So what if it was a third firmament emperor star? He was a 5th firmament immortal king. With the suppression of 2 levels, the difference in strength was huge. Immortal kings had 9 heavens, and each step was like reaching the heavens. This was nonsense. Moreover, he was an emperor after all, and he was just a level lower than the emperor star. Yen Qiuyun was slightly surprised. She didn't expect Ling Han to be so strong. Before this, the first impression that Ling Han had given her was far too poor. He had a mischievous appearance, and was completely unreliable. Now, however, it was proven that he was even an imperial star, so this naturally exceeded her expectations. Fairy Qiuyun, there's no need to care about such a minor character. Please, advised the young immortal kings around her. Yen Qiuyun nodded. This was the #1 martial academy under the heavens. Let alone emperor stars, there were even demon-level geniuses with evolution indexes of 11 or 12. Only Chen Ziyu realized that she had been tricked. She wanted to go and find Ling Han, but Yen Qiuyun grabbed onto her tightly. She could only helplessly leave. Brother, you met with a rebuff, right? When Ling Han returned to his seat, he saw several young people walking over. There were both men and women, and all of them had mocking expressions on their faces. Hee hee, that's Fairy Qiuyun. How can she be someone you can climb up to? That's right. Don't think that you can be so arrogant just because you're an emperor star. Just this batch alone, there are thousands of emperor stars. You really don't count for anything, said a beautiful woman with a sour tone. Before this, she had taken the initiative to strike up a conversation with Ling Han, but Ling Han had indifferently rejected her. She was naturally unhappy in her heart. Now that she had a chance, how could she not take this chance to mock him? Haha. These people all began to laugh. They were inferior to Ling Han, and it was impossible for them to chase away a 4th heaven stage expert with a 3rd heaven stage cultivation. Now that they saw Ling Han being humiliated, it actually became a source of joy for them. Ling Han shook his head. What kind of people were these? Even if they were sovereigns, they shouldn't be so shallow, right? What he didn't know was that these people were natives of the Firefrost Plain. They didn't like outsiders in the first place. The men were jealous and the women were resentful. When these two factors were added together, their performance was incomparably ugly. Ling Han waved his hand. Move away. Don't let out a stench that will affect my meal. This guy. Those young men and women were all angry, but they were either third heaven stage or second heaven stage immortal kings. If they fought, how could they be Ling Han's match? Naturally, they didn't dare to act out. This wine party is actually a blind date. I'm waiting for you to leave alone, someone mocked. That's right. If there's anyone who can get on top of him, I'll eat all the tables. I'll eat the chairs. They deliberately said this to increase the intensity of their mockery. At this moment, there was another commotion at the entrance. Goddess Luan Xing is here. As soon as the sentence was said, everyone in the plaza immediately surged towards the entrance as if they had gone crazy. They were fighting to be in front of the door. Goddess Luan Xing and the other young men and women's eyes also lit up. The Empress's charm was alluring to both men and women. Chapter 25:32. How strange. Could it be that this kind of thing had become so common that no one cared about it? Wu Ju and Xu Shan were both shocked. They had rushed to the place excitedly, only to see two naked men lying on top of each other, moving and roaring at the same time. Their faces turned green. Heavens, this taste was too strong. They naturally hated Zhuo Kai. It was one thing for him to be a pervert, but he had even asked them to play with him. Don't drag us into the ditch too. They hurriedly ran back, wanting to expose Zhuo Kai's shameful behavior to the public. Additionally, they also wanted to seek Ling Han for revenge. They had actually been forced to witness such a scene. Their outlook on life was really going to be twisted. Well, what? Zhuo Kai is actually that kind of person. Someone finally recovered from the shock and began to accept another explosive piece of news. Zhuo Kai actually likes men. That's possible. After playing with these kind of second-generation women too much and getting tired of them, he might want to try something new. Hey, don't make it sound so disgusting. And it's even fresh. I'm about to vomit. I remember now. Zhuo Kai even put his hand on my shoulder a few days ago. He must have had designs on me back then. Congratulations, brother. You might even be taken into Zhuo Kai's harem in a few days. That damn pervert. More and more people began to discuss this. This was indeed big news and a big scandal. What kind of person was Zhuo Bing? He was a dignified quasi-heavenly venerable, but his descendant actually played with men. He could vomit blood to death. Is this real? Someone confirmed with Wu Ju and Xu Shan. Of course it's real. I even recorded it with a memory crystal, said Wu Ju. Sure enough, Wu Ju took out a piece of crystal and activated it with his source energy. The crystal immediately shone and projected a three-dimensional scene. Wow! The entire place was instantly filled with disgusting sounds. Two naked men were piled on top of each other, moving their bodies while roaring. Was there even a need to think about what they were doing? The one in charge of attacking was Zhuo Kai. Hey, that little show is Wu Shi. Someone recognized the young man in purple. Of course, he was not wearing purple anymore. It really is Wu Shi. It can't be. Wu Shi is an emperor, and I've seen him before. It's very normal. Tisk, why would someone with such a hobby tell you? If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I wouldn't have believed it. Everyone shook their heads. Wu Shi could be considered a promising youth, so how could he do such a thing? Wu Ju and Xu Shan searched for a while and soon found Ling Han. Even though their cultivations had been forcibly pulled up, celestial kings were still celestial kings. It was too easy for them to find someone among the crowd. They ran over, wanting to settle the score with Ling Han. He actually dared to plot against them, causing them to fall into such a trap. Get lost, the Empress said softly without waiting for them to speak. Her voice was filled with domineering dominance. Previously, Wu Ju and Ling Han had not gone to the Empress. It was really because Ling Han was too hateful. Only when they were reprimanded did they realize that they had gone over to the Empress. Suddenly, their gazes were fixed on her. The goddess was actually the chaotic stars goddess. They were all stunned speechless, and they were even more at a loss as to what to do. They quickly retreated. Only when they had retreated to the side did they come to a sudden realization. That was not right. Weren't they going to settle the score with Ling Han? What was this now? But when they thought of the Empress's absolute beauty and grace, they did not have the courage to step forward again. Ling Han looked at his wife and couldn't help but smile. After the Empress had advanced into the Celestial King tier, she appeared even more graceful and noble, and even he was finding it a little hard to bear. As the two of them ate, they talked about their experiences in these few years, completely acting as if there was no one else around. In their eyes, there was only the existence of each other. Ling Han asked about Hu Niu and bewitching Maiden Ro. Hu Niu was captured by a heavenly venerable to become his disciple, the Empress said, unable to hold back a smile. Ling Han's expression was strange. Who wouldn't be fawning over being the disciple of a heavenly venerable? But the Empress actually used the word captured, so it could be seen that the little girl had definitely been unwilling at the time. Only this little girl could do it. Ling Han recalled that when Hu Niu had been captured and brought back to the Rock Palace, hadn't she also been unwilling? This little girl had no concept of fated opportunity in her eyes, and everything was done as she pleased. Little Ro is currently breaking through to the third heaven, the Empress continued. Ling Han nodded. Bewitching Maiden Ro originally only had the aptitude of a king tier, but relied on the heavenly Tao Jade, completing regulations, and so on to become a monarch tier. She could effortlessly charge up to the fifth heaven of the Celestial King tier, but the speed of her advancement naturally couldn't compare to that of an Emperor star. What more when the Empress's current evolution index was definitely more than 10. Not only had bewitching Maiden Ro improved greatly, but so had Little Terror. After this battle beast had come to the fiery frost plain, it seemed to have suddenly broken free of its shackles, advancing astonishingly quickly. Now, it was already at the fifth heaven, and in terms of cultivation level alone, it was completely no weaker than Tianqing. This should be because the level of the fiery frost plain was higher and had an extremely large capacity, allowing Little Terror's advancement speed to suddenly increase. It should be known that battle beasts were born for battle in the first place, so what was strange about their advancement speed being fast? Ling Han also spoke of his own experiences, causing the Empress to involuntarily feel heartache. She swore that she would tear Tianqing into pieces and feed him piece by piece to the dogs. I have to avenge this vengeance, Ling Han said with a serious expression. He definitely had to defeat Tianqing. This was his next goal. Just like how he had competed with Ji Wuming in the past, this time it was Tianqing's turn. A powerful opponent could also make him stronger. The two of them spoke for a good while, yet suddenly discovered that the atmosphere of the scene had become cold. They raised their heads and saw that everyone's eyes were focused on the doorway. They also walked over and saw that there was a man dressed completely in black standing at the doorway. His body was entwined with 6 rays of light, and his aura had all turned solid, floating like black clouds, causing one's heart to palpitate. Xiaoxiong, the Empress murmured. This person is very strong, and it is said that he is an existence that has surpassed the Emperor star, and his evolution index is as high as 11. So he was Xiaoxiong. Ling Han nodded internally. A 6th heaven super Emperor star, his battle prowess had definitely soared to 7th heaven, and it was very possible that he was close to 8th heaven. Thus, even Tianqing was no match for this kind of elite, though he would not be defeated. He also knew why there was a sudden silence. It was because Xiaoxiong was pursuing the Empress, and this was something that everyone knew. Yet, he was here being lovey-dovey with the Empress. Xiaoxiong's gaze swept over, and he immediately discovered the Empress. A sliver of a smile actually appeared on his originally cold face, but when he saw Ling Han, this smile immediately froze. He humphed and strode towards Ling Han and the Empress. It's coming, there's going to be a good show. Xiao Xiong is making a move, and that guy is definitely in trouble. Sigh, he doesn't have enough strength, yet he still dares to covet the goddess. Isn't he just seeking his own death? Many people whispered to each other. Ling Han had returned with the empress, and this made him a public enemy in an instant. Xiao Xiong stood still, stopping about 3 meters in front of Ling Han's table. He flicked his fingers and said to Ling Han, "Scram." One word, simple, direct, and domineering. Chapter 25-33. Before Ling Han could speak, he saw the empress stand up, her beautiful face full of frost. "You are the one who should get lost." In terms of domineeringness, the empress was never weaker than anyone else. Xiao Xiong immediately revealed a friendly smile to the empress. "Don't be ridiculous." The empress was about to fly into a rage, but Ling Han stood up, blocked her, and shielded her behind him. He chuckled. "There's nothing to say. Do you dare to battle in the 9 Deaths formation?" A battle in the 9 Deaths formation? Everyone was surprised. Ling Han was really daring, even daring to challenge Xiao Xiong. However, this brat was not stupid. The 9 Deaths formation had a special characteristic, and that was that when high-level celestial kings entered a low-level formation, their cultivation would be suppressed to a corresponding level. For example, if everyone entered the 3rd level of the 9 Deaths formation, then everyone's cultivation would be suppressed to 3rd heaven. "Humph, why should I agree?" Xiao Xiong said coldly. "If you don't have enough strength, don't do anything to provoke me." Ling Han smiled faintly. "In a battle at the same cultivation level, I have yet to meet an opponent. If you don't dare to fight me, just say so." This was provocation. Everyone gasped. Ling Han was really daring, actually daring to be so arrogant. However, although battles were not prohibited in the academy, there were restrictions on cultivation. The gap between the two sides in a battle could not be more than 2 heaven, or an elite would appear and immediately stop the battle. Thus, unless Ling Han would foolishly agree to fight Xiao Xiong would definitely not make a move against him. No wonder this guy was so confident. It turned out that he was already prepared. Xiao Xiong glanced at the empress, his expression becoming darker and darker, and he said, "All right, battle in the 9 Deaths formation." He took the lead and walked out of the cave. Ling Han smiled and also started walking, and the empress definitely followed closely behind. When these 3 people left, the whole place was instantly in an uproar and they swarmed away. When most people had left, Xian Ying arrived late. When he saw that there were only a few people, he couldn't help but be surprised, because he had calculated the time, and felt that this should be about the time, so why were there still so few people? Ling Han, Xiao Xiong, and the others soon arrived at the entrance of the academy, and the 9 Deaths formation was in front. "Which one?" Xiao Xiong asked in a low voice. "The second one," Ling Han said. His body technique was not suppressed by the array, so the greater the suppression on his realm, the better. For example, if he was at the 1st layer of heaven, he would be able to suppress Xiao Xiong until he became a retard with a single finger. Of course, entering the 3rd level of the 9 Slaughter formation was not a big deal. His body technique was simply too powerful, and he had a great chance of defeating a Stage 3 Super Emperor star. It was just that he would not be able to easily suppress them. Xiao Xiong couldn't be bothered to speak and directly entered the array from behind the 1st stone tablet. Ling Han smiled and walked into the 9 Deaths formation. "Now that we are all at the 2nd heavenly layer, we have the strength to fight on the same level. Yes, whoever has a higher evolution index will have an advantage. Needless to say, it must be Xiao Xiong. His evolution count is as high as 11. Among this batch of students, the only one who can suppress him is Fire Hibiscus. And innate, that's a monster." Everyone spoke one after another. Xiao Xiong was still the best. Even if his cultivation was suppressed, those with a higher realm would definitely have a slight advantage. This was something that could not be changed. At this moment, 2 impressive-looking men appeared at almost the same time and landed beside the empress. Gu He, Niao Hua. These were the other 2 super monsters. It was said that their evolution indexes had reached 11, and their cultivation had also reached the 6th heavenly layer. Their battle prowess was unparalleled. "What's the situation?" Gu He asked. He was completely different from Xiaoxiong. His face was full of friendly smiles, and he seemed very approachable. "Lord Gu, Xiaoxiong is fighting with someone in the 9 Deaths formation," someone replied. "Oh, who is it?" Gu He was a little surprised. Miao Hua and him were both here, so who was qualified enough for Xiaoxiong to fight? Li Si. Who? Gu He and Miao Hua's expressions became strange at the same time. Was he joking with them? "He is indeed called Li Si." More people nodded. At least, this was what Ling Han had said himself. "There is also Zhang San here." Someone suddenly pointed at the first stone tablet and said, the 8th position clearly had the words Zhang San written on it. Zhang San Li Si. It's the same person. Hiss. Although that person is listed on the immemorial stone, he has not appeared for 7,000 years. Everyone suspects that he might have used a forbidden technique to charge through, leaving behind extremely heavy injuries. That's why he has not appeared. Could it be that he has recovered? If he uses a forbidden technique again, Xiaoxiong might really lose. That person had used a forbidden technique to charge to the 8th position of the immemorial stone. This was something that Xiaoxiong could not compare to. Now, if Ling Han could use the same trick again, would Xiaoxiong be able to win in a battle of the same level? Impossible. Gu He and Miao Hua were still a little curious. Why would Xiaoxiong suddenly fight with this person? They asked about the situation, and their faces all darkened. Damn. If it was them, they would also not hesitate to make a move. Damn, he actually dared to make a move against their goddess. "I hope Xiaoxiong can teach this kid a ruthless lesson," Gu He said. "What a stupid guy," Miao Hua also said coldly. "Oh, someone is coming out." A figure flashed behind the first stone tablet. This person was definitely not passing through the 9 Deaths formation, but returning from the original path. Who was it? Everyone stood on their tiptoes, and all of them immediately revealed shocked expressions. Ling Han, it was Ling Han. Hiss, how long had it been, and he had already beaten Xiaoxiong to the ground? Even Gu He and Miao Hua were greatly shocked, and their expressions became incomparably solemn. Although they were incomparably conceited and thought that they were stronger than Xiaoxiong in a battle of the same level, there was still a limit to how strong they were. No matter what, they would need to fight for a few days and nights before a victor could be determined. Moreover, the difference between victory and defeat would definitely be negligible. However, not much time had passed, and Ling Han had already walked out. What kind of crushing advantage was this? Could it be that this guy's evolution index had reached 12? You stop. Xiaoxiong also appeared. However, when he ran out, everyone could not help but laugh out loud. This guy was too miserable. His face had been beaten until it was swollen like a pig's head, and there was no trace of his cold and arrogant appearance left. Originally, everyone was still hoping that Ling Han did not fight with Xiaoxiong at all, and that he had only gone in for a short while before running out. However, looking at Xiaoxiong's appearance, who would still have any doubts? Ling Han was too strong. He could actually be so strong in a battle of the same level. This was an absolute crushing. Ling Han turned around and smiled. What, haven't you been beaten up enough? Xiaoxiong's entire body trembled, and this was caused by his anger. You cheated. Your cultivation is definitely higher than the 2nd heavenly layer. Ling Han laughed. What you said is wrong. Even if my cultivation is higher than the 2nd heavenly layer, it should have been suppressed to the 2nd heavenly layer. In the 9 Deaths formation, everyone's cultivation is the same. Xiaoxiong was immediately speechless, but he still felt that something was wrong. Ling Han was too strong, so strong that it was completely unreasonable. Why don't we go in again and fight? Ling Han suggested with a smile. Chapter 25:34. Fight your sister. Xiaoxiong almost cursed out loud. Although he tried his best to resist just now, he couldn't do anything at all. He was miserably abused. Still fighting? Let's fight after we enter the third great formation, Xiong said in a low voice. He did not want to take advantage of Ling Han, as Ling Han was at the third layer. Okay, Ling Han agreed without hesitation. They once again entered the formation and immediately began the battle. This time, it was clear that Xiong had the upper hand. This was because Ling Han's true cultivation level was at the third heaven. He no longer had the advantage of not being suppressed. However, Ling Han was able to compete with Xiong in terms of rules alone, and he was even better in terms of physical skills. When he combined the two, it was equivalent to two of him joining forces to fight Xiong. Is this something Xiong can resist? In just a few hundred moves, he was defeated once again, and his swollen face became even more tragic. Someone is coming out. Is it still Li Si? Outside, when the crowd saw the silhouettes flashing, they all cried out. It's Ling Han. Everyone sighed with emotion. This guy won again. Xiong also walked out. His sorry state made people laugh. His face was gloomy, and his eyes were full of fighting spirit. After 2 battles, he naturally discovered that in addition to the power of rules, Ling Han also had physical skills and was not suppressed by the 9 Deaths formation. However, as Ling Han was a third firmament immortal king, there was a limit to his body techniques. If he were to make a move now, he could easily suppress Ling Han. But, firstly, the martial courtyard had its rules. Secondly, if he were to rely on the suppression of his realm to defeat Ling Han, then it would be an unfair victory. So, what would be the point of it? Enter the 4th formation and fight again. Xiong couldn't open his mouth, which was equivalent to admitting that he wasn't a match for Ling Han in a battle of the same level. He looked deeply at Ling Han. If Ling Han's physical skills could be improved along with his realm, then he would never be a match for Ling Han in a battle of the same level. But if that was not the case, then it was a different story. He flicked his sleeves and left. The arrogance in his heart made him choose to wait for Ling Han to advance further before fighting. Junior brother, there's no need to be deliberately mystifying. Tell me your real name, Gu Hui said to Ling Han. His face was full of a kind smile, as if he would never get angry. A real man never changes his name. I am Li Si, Ling Han said with a smile. A look of displeasure finally appeared on Gu Hui's face. Although he had always been amiable, it did not mean that he was less arrogant than others. On the contrary, this kind of humility was merely an expression of his arrogance. Miao Hua also revealed an angry expression. Do you think we can't deal with you just because we are 3 realms higher than you? If you aren't convinced, then let's meet in the 3rd great formation. Let's have a fair battle. Whoever comes, I'll suppress one. Ling Han challenged, opposing him with equal harshness. Do you dare? Gu He and Miao Hua both furrowed their brows. Their battle prowess was on par with Xiong, and even if they were confident that they were stronger, they would not surpass him by much. However, Ling Han did not take too much time to defeat Xiong, and it was obvious that he had a crushing advantage in terms of strength. It was truly unwise to fight rashly. They decided to go after Xiong first. He had fought with Ling Han twice, so he should have some understanding of Ling Han. The 2 of them did not speak, and they turned and left at the same time. Amazing! A 3rd Heaven Immortal King had actually forced away a 6th Heaven Immortal King, and these 2 were existences ranked in the top 3 of this year's combat prowess ranking. Everyone was extremely excited. After today, a new genius would appear in the academy, and his talent would surpass the level of Gu He and Miao Hua. He should be comparable to Tianxing, right? They all returned to Xian Ying's cave abode and continued with the blind date. However, after experiencing the previous few incidents, everyone's interest was greatly reduced. Bastard! An angry roar was heard, and Zhuo Kai rushed in like an arrow. He looked around and his eyes were about to spit fire. This was a great humiliation. He had actually been stripped naked and stacked together with another naked man. Moreover, they were moving and rubbing against each other. Just thinking about it made him feel incomparably disgusted. More importantly, this scene had also been seen by his scoundrel friends. He knew what kind of character these 2 had, and they would definitely spread the news everywhere. Thus, his shameful matter would definitely be known by everyone now. He hated Ling Han, the main culprit behind all of this. You! He very quickly discovered Ling Han and immediately shouted loudly, "I want you to die." The Empress flared up in fury and pointed menacingly at Zhuo Kai. "You lowly wild dog, you deserve to die 10,000 times." Only now did Zhuo Kai see the Empress, and his aura involuntarily froze. The Empress's aura was too strong, and he couldn't even raise his head. However, his fury was too strong, and he very quickly flew into a violent rage. He said, "I will give 100 million star stones to whoever kills him for me." Everyone acted as if they hadn't heard him. As a student of the Academy, and more so as a Celestial King-level Monarch tier and Emperor star, who would care about 100 million star stones? Zhuo Kai also knew that he had flaunted his wealth in the wrong place. This wasn't like those underlings of his who would be all over him as long as he took out some star stones. He pondered for a moment, then drew out a jade box and said, "This is a crimson clear flame pill. It can greatly increase the cultivation level of celestial kings below 5th heaven, and save at least 10 billion years of bitter cultivation. Whoever kills that person, this crimson clear flame pill will belong to him." Suddenly, a great many people looked tempted. Saving 10 billion years of bitter cultivation, this was very astonishing, so who wouldn't be tempted? But the problem was, firstly, no one dared to kill someone in the Academy, and secondly, how many people could be a match for Ling Han? Thus, though everyone was very tempted, there was still no one who stood out. Zhuo Kai faltered. He wasn't an idiot, after all, and after a moment's thought, he knew where he had gone wrong. He said, "Whoever beats him into a dead dog, this crimson clear flame pill can also be given to him." "Shut up." With a cold snort, Xian Ying spoke up. He was a 9th heaven celestial king, but someone actually dared to beat and kill someone in his cave abode? What kind of status did he have? Zhuo Kai raised his head, cupped his hands, and said, "Greetings, Lord Xian." He didn't show too much reverence, because his great-grandfather was a quasi-celestial venerable. Although it was just one step more than a 9th heaven celestial king, this step was shockingly large. "Lord Xian, how about giving me some face?" he said. The others almost laughed out loud. A mere 3rd heaven celestial king actually dared to ask for face from a 9th heaven celestial king? He really didn't know his own limits. Only a spoiled brat like Zhuo Kai could do such a thing. Even Xian Ying couldn't help but laugh. He shook his head and said, "Senior Zhuo actually has a descendant like you. I wonder if he'll be humiliated by you one day." He waved his hand and said, "Go." Boom. A great force surged out, and Zhuo Kai couldn't help but retreat. He only stopped when he was out of the cave abode. He glared at the door, but didn't enter again. A 9th heaven celestial king had already spoken, and had even made a move. If he still didn't know what was good for him, then he would only be asking for trouble. However, he definitely wouldn't let this matter rest. He turned around angrily and strode away. Ling Han immediately whispered into the Empress's ear, "I'll be right back." Zhuo Kai actually had something as good as the crimson clear flame pill on him, so he definitely couldn't let him escape just like that. Chapter 25-36. Wally had also followed Zhou Heng to the Flame Frost Plain. Ling Han had learned of this from the messages left behind by Hu Niu, the Rain Emperor, and the others. The Empress spread her hands, indicating that she did not know. Such a proud person like her, would she care about who lived where? Ling Han could only be speechless. This was definitely his wife, without a doubt. He was researching the crimson clear flame pill himself. If he could refine it, it would be of great help to their group. A day passed, and there were immediately many interesting stories in the Martial Arts Academy. For example, a fierce person called Li Si had violently abused Xiao Yingxiong in the 9 Deaths formation, and twice at that. Another example was that the Luanxing goddess suddenly had an owner, and this lucky person who was envied by countless people and wanted to curse was still that Li Si. Another example was that a trend had suddenly arisen in the Martial Arts Academy, and the first couple to be exposed was the Zhuo clan's Kai Zi and Wu Shi. Even more absurd was that these two actually had sex in the wild. Even more absurd was that these two actually did it more than once. They had just been exposed, and in the blink of an eye, they had sex in a carriage. It was one thing if they had sex in their own abode, but they actually parked it by the roadside. Who didn't pass by that rhythmic vibration, as well as those bursts of tiger roars? Shameless, too shameless. Of course, Zhuokai's matter was a joke, but it was precisely this kind of news that had the most potential to spread. In a single day, it had spread throughout the entire martial arts academy. Who knew if it would directly anger the old man to death when it spread to Zhuobing, who was fighting in the distant outer realm? Ling Han was concentrating on researching the crimson clear flame pill, but after only a day, he was called out by the Empress. A dog had come to visit him. The large black dog sat in the hall, acting like a human, holding a teacup in his hand. His expression was unfathomable, and he had the demeanor of a conman. "Little Han, come and massage my legs." The large black dog did not need to turn around at all. He was a ninth heaven celestial king, so his divine sense was naturally powerful. Ling Han was surprised. "How did you recognize me?" He had cultivated the heaven-deceiving art. Even when he was born, he did not notice any abnormalities. There was a look of disdain on the large black dog's face. "Do you think I don't know you well enough?" Yesterday, when I heard about Zhuokai's incident, Grandpa Dog immediately thought that this unlucky grandson of mine had been pranked by someone. In this world, apart from me, I believe that only you, the little rascal who has received my teachings, can come up with this kind of prank. Ling Han couldn't help but chuckle. This large black dog was the master of pranks, and it actually recognized people by pranking them. "It's good that you're here. In the future, when I mess with people, you'll have to cover for me," he said with a smile. "No problem," the large black dog said as he patted his chest. Ling Han said leisurely, "I heard that the Zhuo family's ancestor is a quasi-celestial venerable." Grandpa Dog's stomach suddenly feels a bit uncomfortable. "Yesterday, I think I ate an expired beef kebab. Grandpa Dog is going to find that guy to settle the score." He actually dared to sell something like that to Grandpa Dog. The large black dog slid down to the ground, and then took the opportunity to walk out. This damn dog really bullied the weak and feared the strong. There was no saving him. Ling Han hurriedly stopped him and said, "Can't you have a bit of backbone?" What's backbone? Can it be eaten?" The large black dog was completely shameless. He had never cared about face before. Ling Han sighed and said, "Zhuobing is in the extraterrestrial battlefield, and it's impossible for him to return in a short period of time." "Why isn't Grandpa Dog's stomach hurting anymore?" The large black dog rubbed his stomach. As expected of a ninth heaven celestial king, Grandpa Dog is destined to become a celestial venerable in the future. The quality of his body is really good. Ling Han gave him the middle finger, and then said with a serious expression, "The Tower of Three Realms has now fallen into the hands of Heavenly Venerable. We have to think of a way to take it back." This was the final remnant of the Heavenly Venerable original born, and it definitely could not fall into the hands of others. The large black dog also became serious and said, "Though I can suppress that brat, firstly, there are rules in the academy, and I can't openly make a move. Secondly, that brat is the manifestation of divine metal, and even Grandpa Dog can't break through his defenses. It will be difficult to forcefully take back the Tower of Three Realms." Ling Han was also aware of this, and he slowly nodded and said, "However, we definitely have to deal with Heavenly Venerable. Furthermore, when I battled with him on the Celestial Road, it was also the remnant will of the Heavenly Venerable original born that appeared at the final juncture and disturbed his mind. Only then did we manage to escape." "Lord Original Born." The large black dog instantly became excited. "Let's go. Grandpa Dog will immediately kill that brat and rescue Lord Original Born." Looking at his excited expression, Ling Han nodded internally. At least in terms of attitude towards the Heavenly Venerable Original Born, the large black dog was still extremely loyal, and did not sully the moral character of a dog. "Woof, brat, you're blinking your rat eyes all over the place. Are you cursing Grandpa Dog in your heart?" The large black dog was extremely sensitive. Ling Han said seriously, "I'm praising you." Then, he pondered slightly and said, "Heavenly Venerable is the incarnation of the celestial realm, and it can be said that those below the Heavenly Venerable tier are unable to do anything to him." Under the regulations of the plane, the ninth heaven celestial king was the limit. Although Heavenly Venerable was created by the heaven and earth through a backdoor, if the heaven and earth could really do as they pleased, would there still be Heavenly Venerables born? The power of heaven and earth was endless, yet there were regulations to restrict it. This was the regulations of the origin world, and could not be defied. Thus, Heavenly Venerable was very freakish, but it was impossible for him to be freakish to an endless extent. Could it be that I can only deal with him after becoming a Heavenly Venerable? The large black dog was slightly anxious. Although both he and Ling Han had the possibility of becoming a Heavenly Venerable, and in the Fire Frost plane, this possibility was even higher, that was definitely something that would happen countless years later. If one wanted to become a Heavenly Venerable, the accumulation of several epochs was a small matter. If they had to wait for so long, the large black dog could not sit still. Ling Han was also pondering and said, "To deal with Heavenly Venerable, we first have to break through his physique. But aside from a Heavenly Venerable, what else can deal with divine metal?" He looked at the large black dog, and the large black dog also looked at him. The man and dog practically said at the same time, "Heavenly Venerable Treasure Tool." Divine metal was the same level as Celestial King tier, so only those above Celestial King tier could destroy divine metal. Ling Han drew out the divine demon sword, and said, "Then the first thing we have to do is to raise this celestial sword to Heavenly Venerable tier." Gasp, that requires an astonishing amount of divine metal. The large black dog bared his teeth. Ling Han broke into a grin and said, "Then I'll take it." "Why me? The one who will benefit is clearly you, brat. Unless you give this sword to me," the large black dog said shamelessly. Meanwhile, Ling Han said, "Firstly, you are a ninth heaven celestial king, and you are very powerful. There are only a handful of people in this world who can compete with you. Secondly, you are a dog, and your nose is so sensitive, so it is naturally easy for you to find divine metal. Woof, I will bite you to death." The large black dog was furious and immediately pounced. Ling Han naturally could not be a match for a ninth heaven celestial king. He hurriedly stopped fighting and then said, "You should know where Wall lives, right? I have something to discuss with him." "Oh, right, how much do you understand about the intrinsic power of the origin world?" There was a gloomy expression on the large black dog's face. "Difficult, too difficult. The first step of becoming a Heavenly Venerable was to start from the unique power of a plane. However, Wall's model was aimed at the 6 great intrinsic powers, so he directly started from the second step. Thus, the large black dog, a ninth heaven celestial king, was dumbfounded. Chapter 25:37. The large black dog brought Ling Han to find Vale. Although Vale was a battle soldier, because he had self-awareness, he could be considered an independent living being. Thus, he was brought here and became a member of the academy. How did he get through the 9-death formation? He ran all the way and endured the beatings. It couldn't be helped. His body was made from the so-called superstring material. It had an astonishing self-recovery ability and was almost indestructible. All these years, he had been absorbing the knowledge of the fiery frost plane. Although he went to a high-grade plane, he obviously didn't have the qualifications to go to a super high-grade plane. When the large black dog and Ling Han arrived, Vale's eyes lit up. He was still absorbing the knowledge, but he was entertaining the two of them without delay. "Analyze this pill for me." Ling Han took out the crimson clear flame pill and handed it over. Vale didn't refuse. He took the pill and said seriously, "You owe me 3 pieces of immortal gold. It's really expensive to hire this guy." Ling Han complained in his heart. But when he thought about it, he was the elite of a plane from hundreds of epochs. It was understandable that his appearance fee was higher. Vale temporarily stopped absorbing the knowledge and began to analyze this pill. After a day, he listed all the ingredients and gave 3 pill recipes. There were slight discrepancies. This was deduced based on the completed pill. The Crimson Clear Flame pill has been lost. This is the pill recipe that I completed using the incomplete recipe and the completed pill. The accuracy is 91%, 87%, and 83% respectively. Vale's expression was solemn. He was like this all day long. It was extremely difficult to make him smile. The large black dog teased, "Wah, smile for Grandpa Dog." Vale grinned. Instantly, his upper lip turned up and his lower lip drooped down, revealing 2 complete rows of teeth. "Are you smiling, or are you trying to scare me?" The large black dog quickly waved his paw. "How many times has Grandpa Dog taught you to smile naturally? You can't be pretentious or deliberate." Vale stared at him blankly. He was an expert in analyzing, but when it came to being a person, he was the biggest idiot. Ling Han laughed and patted the large black dog's shoulder. "Don't force him. This pill formula of mine requires a lot of great medicines. Right now, I'm short of money and can't buy the materials. How about we go make a big deal? Teasage, Grandpa Dog doesn't get any benefits, so I won't do it." The large black dog immediately refused. Ling Han said leisurely, "We're going to raid Tianxing's house. Are you going to do it?" The large black dog was instantly energized. Ling Han nodded. "Bring Wally along too. We'll have to rely on him to break the formation." The man and the dog looked at Wally at the same time. Wally's face was full of confusion. Although he didn't understand human emotions, he still felt that the man and the dog's expressions were a little scary. He was born to be nurtured by heaven and earth, and his talent was astonishing. After he came to the martial academy, it was said that there were celestial venerables fighting to take him as a disciple, and he was probably rewarded with many treasures. If they could ransack his abode, the harvest would definitely be astonishing. However, the entire martial courtyard was under the control of the Empyrean. If anyone were to openly commit a crime, they would definitely be pulled out immediately. Thus, they needed Wally's help. He could help them escape undetected. The 3 of them were definitely a perfect match for being a thief. With Wally in charge of hiding their traces, analyzing, and breaking the restrictions, they easily broke into Tianxing's abode, and with the large black dog's help, even Tianxing wouldn't be able to discover their infiltration. Ling Han and the large black dog found the treasure trove, and immediately began to sweep it clean. Why didn't Tianxing store his treasures in the Black Tower? It was simple. The Black Tower couldn't be used for a long time, and needed the power of a celestial venerables to recover. Previously, Tianxing only allowed the Black Tower to grow larger, and he used it as a weapon to smash people. Other powers couldn't be used at all. There's also divine metal. Ling Han was shocked. He actually found a piece of divine metal here. "Mine," Wally immediately said. His evolution required things like divine metal or dimensional scrolls. "You haven't even digested the dimensional scrolls, so why are you in such a hurry?" "I'll let you owe it for now," Ling Han immediately said. "It belongs to me. Grandpa Dog still doesn't have a suitable weapon." The large black dog was also drooling. Ling Han was puzzled. "How come you don't even have a celestial tool?" It was normal for ordinary celestial kings to not have a celestial tool, but the large black dog was at the 9th heaven level. So how could he not obtain divine metal? "Don't mention it. I was severely wounded at that time, and was forced to undergo a great rebirth, so I didn't keep any external possessions. My celestial tool has probably also been snatched away by someone to be reforged," the large black dog said gloomily. Ling Han laughed. "I didn't think that there would be a time when you were at a disadvantage. It's all because of that bastard 9-5 celestial venerate. When Grandpa Dog breaks through, I'll definitely chop off his dog head." Pay, I'll chop off his head and kick it like a ball," the large black dog said angrily. Ling Han nodded. With the large black dog's craftiness, only a celestial venerate would be able to make him suffer. "Let the divine demon sword devour this divine metal," he said. "After all, it's filthy and can't see the light of day." Though the large black dog was very unwilling, he could only agree. Thankfully, there were really quite a number of treasures here. He distributed a few Celestial King tier great medicines. Even if they were no longer of much use to him, he still had to obtain something. This damn dog would never make a losing deal. They retreated and immediately divided up the filthy treasures, destroying them as soon as possible. In less than 2 days, Tianxing discovered that the treasure trove had been robbed, and he was furious. Because the losses were too great, even the Academy had participated in the investigation, but even the Celestial Venerate in charge had not discovered anything strange, so this matter could only be left unsettled. The large black dog instigated Ling Han, asking if they should do it again in a few days. Ling Han, however, shook his head. This kind of deal could only be done once, but not twice. To do something bad right under the nose of a Celestial Venerate, the first time was when he was unprepared, but was the real Celestial Venerate a mere decoration? Wally's deceitful techniques could be successful for a while, but that was because the Celestial Venerate did not pay attention at all, but if he still wanted to commit a crime now, he would only be walking into a trap. Moreover, Tianxing had just been robbed, so what could he gain by going back now? A sheep had to be fattened before being slaughtered. The large black dog's words were also spoken in a moment of anger. He was the ancestor of thieves, so how could he not understand? He muttered a few words and then left. He wanted to travel the world, and first forge a celestial tool for himself, and then obtain enough celestial metal for the divine demon sword to swallow. Rescuing the heavenly Venerate Fate-born was his greatest wish now, even surpassing becoming a Celestial Venerate himself. Ling Han began to concoct the Crimson Clear Flame Pill. There were still not enough materials, and Ling Han only managed to concoct a Crimson Clear Flame Pill. He thought for a moment, and did not consume it himself. Instead, he planned to sell it, and exchange it for more materials to concoct more alchemical pills. He released the news that there was a Crimson Clear Flame Pill for sale, and it soon attracted the interest of many people. What was interesting was that Zhuokai had once taken out this kind of alchemical pill to summon a fierce person in an attempt to kill Ling Han. Now, Ling Han had taken out the Crimson Clear Flame Pill, so was he robbing Zhuokai? But when this alchemical pill was appraised, it was proven that it had just been concocted, and had nothing to do with Zhuokai at all. Ling Han took the opportunity to release the news that he was a 5-star alchemist, and could concoct Celestial King tier level great pills for others. Of course, the fee was also very high. This was Ling Han's true goal. They are tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.